contracts, and now you don't have draft picks to reassess this. I think you're starting to get to the point where it's looking good, maybe a couple more years, and then you're going to hit that point where guys are getting older, you don't have prospects coming in, and it's going to start turning the other direction.
I mean, they've done this with Max Pacioretty.
That's the other one.
Riley
Thank you.
Smith. They did it with Alex Tuck. Like, we've seen them do this where they just consistently cycle through some of these players, and what they do is, hey, if there's a blue chip talent that we believe can come in and help us out and can improve us somewhere, we're going to go get that guy. And we'll figure out the rest later. And if that means that for a little while our locker room chemistry maybe is a little bit off, so be it. Hey, Ivan Barbashev's available. He's a guy that plays exactly the style that we need. And if we re-sign him, it's going to mean that we have to miss out on somebody else. And like down the road, for example, right now, that means Marchessault can't come back. All right, we'll figure that out when we get there. Hey, there's a defenseman that becomes available in Noah Hannafin. He's a big puck-moving defenseman. He can play on our top pair. Okay, yeah, but if we do that, guys, then what does that mean for McNabb? What does that mean for Whitecloud? What does that mean for your guy, Nicholas Hague? We'll figure that out. That's essentially the way that they operate during the season. And, Alex, I kind of love it. I don't know how long you can operate this way and for it to be a sustainable way to run a business, run a organization. But they are trying to maximize their winning window right now.
Yeah.
And for that, I respect the hell out of it, dude. They probably know, hey, Mark Stone nearing the end of whatever this prime is of his career. And really our winning window is tied to him. And so if he ends up getting on the other side of his prime, we're going to have to restart this thing again. And when that happens, we'll figure out the way that we can operate that way to, like, maximize our rebuilding efforts. But for right now, the here and now, they have been to the Stanley Cup multiple times in the first 5 years of their organization. They went to the conference finals another time. So 3 out of the first 5 years, 6 years of their organization, they found a way to at least get to the conference finals. I'd say it's working so far the way that they're operating, man.
Absolutely.
And I respect it. I enjoy it. It's a hell of a lot of fun. It's basically like if the Padres were actually good at the way that they do business, or the way that the Seattle Mariners, if they were good at the way that they do business, and they have success not just in the regular season, but when they get to the playoffs. That's who the Golden Knights are. They know who what their identity is as an organization. I kind of love it.
It's fun right now, and I'm not denying that, but what do we always say? Flags fly forever. I think you'll have to capitalize on this and maybe get another Stanley Cup championship, although this one's going to keep you there for a while. I do think, though, they're trending in a direction that is going to be Pittsburgh Penguins-esque, to where when it drops, I mean, look, you've got Mark Stone, who's been on the LTIR for a long piece of time over the last 3 seasons. Jack Eichel missed some significant time. Alex Pietrangelo has been in and out of the lineup a lot this season. The pieces that you have right now that you're trying to win with are starting to get a little older, and you're going to move on from some guys, and if you're not replenishing that pipeline, it's gonna take a Pittsburgh Penguins dive. But again, I'm with you.
I actually disagree with you completely here, wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they don't have the same long-term contracts that the Pittsburgh Penguins do.
I mean,
like they have one deal that goes beyond 2026. One. And it's Tomas Hertl. That's it. Beyond that, and that may be a disaster, to be totally fair. Like, Jack Eichel, 2 more years left on his contract. Big money, but 2 years left.
But you also aren't selecting in the first round until 2027.
I don't think it bothers them.
Well, it doesn't bother them. And
I'm a first-round pick this year.
When the next
I don't know how, but
I don't know how either.
But the reason I don't think it bothers them is next year when they get that next first-round pick 3 years down the road, how do you supplement your talent? You just trade that first-round pick to go get the next.
And look, what else you do? You trade Jack Eichel.
Yeah.
When he enters the final year of this contract, you know what they're going to do if they're losing at that point in time? They trade him in the offseason.
Look, I'm not being Debbie Downer with this. Like,
they trade Nicholas Hague to the Blues for a second-round pick. Like, these are the things that you can do when you go get that top-end talent. Man, I can find a third-pair defenseman. Blues have all kinds of those guys. The hard players to find are the ones that they trade for.
Yeah, you are not wrong at all. And again, I sound like Debbie Downer with this. I like what they're doing because they're aggressive, and I like aggressive teams that are trying to win. I just look at them right now, and I'm thinking, man, they get into the playoffs. I don't know what they're going to look like in the playoffs. If you get bounced in the first round, then you're looking at the offseason going, man, what the hell are we going to do? I mean, next season, their top line, if healthy, Eichel, Hertl, Stone. That is an awesome top line. You know what their next line is? William Karlsson, Ivan Barbashev, and Nicholas Roy.
It's not going to be that, though.
Well, it is.
Because we know how the Vegas Golden Knights operate. I don't know what it's going to be.
I don't know how you're getting anything that plays in your top 6 with
They're
what you're trading away.
Trade Nicholas Hague for either a pick that they flip for a player, or they'll trade it for a guy like Brandon Saad.
Yeah.
They'll be like, you know what? You guys get the defenseman that was a healthy scratch for us for half of the season. He's young. He's got some upside. He's big. He goes in. He'll probably be in your top 4. He was not even a guy that saw the ice most of the time for us when we were healthy. And in return, we'll get somebody that, like, for you, doesn't have a lot of value right now in Brandon Saad because of where you're at in your life cycle as an organization. But for us, Brandon Saad can come in next year, score his 25 goals, get his 45 points, be on our third line, and we feel great about it.
Yeah.
And, like, we'll fill out our top 9 that way.
Again, they find ways to keep making this happen, and I don't know how. I think it's why people get frustrated so much with them. But, I mean, Tampa's done the same thing where they keep finding ways to make it happen. Chicago did it for the longest time. The LA Kings did it. I just know how it goes in the NHL. There is a point where you think you can sustain that, and at that point where you're like, we can keep this thing going, and then it dips, and it dips fast.
I think the difference for Vegas, and this is where I will give them credit of operating not just aggressively, but also smart within the constraints of being aggressive, is a lot of the teams that we talk about when they go this aggressive path, they are acquiring a player and then immediately 8-year deal. 8-year deal. Just throwing out these no trade clauses, no move clauses, and 8 years on the deals. That is not what Vegas has done for a lot of these players. Now, they did it here with Noah Hannafin, where they said, you know what, we're going to keep him here for the long haul. But most of the time when they acquire these players, it's shorter term. It's guys that come in and they're there for a few years. Let me give you the entire list of full no trade or full no move clauses that are currently on their books, Alex. It's Jack Eichel, it's Tomas Hertl, and then beyond that, it is Alex Pietrangelo. That's it, dude. They've got 3 of them. The Blues have more full no-trade clauses on their books than the Vegas Golden Knights do on theirs. And you can throw in Mark Stone on that as well, but he's on the LTIR, a little bit of a different situation. A lot of them are modified no-trade clauses, which means that there's some flexibility for the organization. Like, it's just a smart, well-run organization, man. They're doing it in a way that is not the norm in the NHL, but hey, if you're going to operate this way, this is probably the best way you can do it.
Well,
I respect the hell out of it. I wish it was easier for other organizations to operate that way too.
They also have the ability to garner interest by any free agent ever available.
Totally.
So when you need to fill a void and it's like, wait, I can go to Vegas and Vegas wants me? Oh, yeah, I'll go for cheap because cheap means I'm bringing in more money.
And no state income taxes. So
yeah, that's what I mean.
Money that I'm earning, like the money that...
That's why Hannafin signed that, because he wasn't going to get that anywhere else.
He could have gotten the exact same contract in Calgary. Apparently, their terms were very similar for him. But it would have meant significantly less in his pocket because of the amount of taxes that would come out. Yep. So they have that working for them. It is a very advantageous market to be in right now. Guys just love living in Las Vegas, not on the Strip, but in the area that they have outside of the Strip area in Las Vegas.
Which is an awesome area, by the way. It's right next to the practice facility.
So they're doing it right now.
They are,
Las Vegas.
But I'll warn people, and I'll point and laugh when I'm right. It's going to go down quick soon.
My counter that, though, is like I could say that about every team. You know,
absolutely.
Every build is fragile.
Look at the Blues. Their build fragilely has come to it came to a screeching halt last year,
and it was shorter.
Yeah,
their window of contention was shorter than the window of real contention for the Vegas Golden Knights has been thus far as well. So it's. And I'm not telling you the Blues did it wrong. The Blues did it right within what they had available to them, because Vegas also had some superstars. Like that's how they've been able to manage their organization. It's different. Every team goes about it a little bit differently. The biggest thing, though, if you're a Blues fan, what this means for you
is Nicholas Hague is going to be a Blue next year.
There may be opportunities to grab some of those players that are on the outside looking in to the Vegas Golden Knights because of the way that they operate. Maybe that means a Marchessault becomes available this offseason. I don't know if the Blues would be interested in him. He's a little bit older, but he's a good player. Could help you out in your top 6. Maybe that means Nicholas Hague. Young, got a lot of size to him, could come in and immediately upgrade you in a way that is meaningful.
Get it done, Doug. Get it done.
Blues back in action tonight. They are taking on the Carolina Hurricanes in a game that is super meaningful for the St. Louis Blues, not just in terms of the standings, but also because you're going to see Scott Perunovich once again on that top pair defensively with Colton Parayko, and it looks like you're going to see Zach Dean in a top 9 capacity once again as well. So excited to see that. Excited to see Zach Bolduc back up there with Robert Thomas. We'll get into all of that coming up later on today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat is off and running over at youtube.com/101ESPN. A little bit of a slow start over there, but we have gotten everything ready to go now. YouTube is up and running. 101ESPN STL is the place where you find that over on YouTube. Coming up next, I saw somebody earlier today that compared Ivan Herrera's minor league numbers to one of the best young catchers in Major League Baseball. And you can make an argument that Ivan Herrera was better in AAA last year than this guy was in AAA when he was down there. I'll tell you who that is and what it means for the Cardinals next year on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Swing, a high fly ball hit to right. Castellanos back. Donnie gulps one out to tie the game.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Ivan Herrera has been a sensation early on so far this year for the St. Louis Cardinals, and maybe that shouldn't come as much of a surprise to us. Guys, he was one of the most productive hitting catchers in the minors in the last decade. If you look at what he was able to accomplish while down at Memphis last year, you look at catchers his age down in AAA since 2013. The only players that had a higher OPS in that stretch were Keibert Ruiz back in 2021, and then MJ Melendez, who's not a real catcher.
Whoa.
He plays right field for the Kansas City Royals. He's not a catcher.
Like Vince Dunn's a defenseman, but he's not really a defenseman?
Yeah, Jake Wallman, who's a forward who happens to play the position
I'm a defenseman.
Those are the two guys that had a higher OPS at his age in AAA while playing the spot of catcher. Somebody posted on Twitter earlier today, Alex, Ivan Herrera's AAA numbers at the same age as what we saw from Adley Rutschman in AAA a couple of years ago. I was genuinely blown away. I don't know how I have not seen this anywhere else before. Dude, you can make a pretty compelling case that Herrera was actually more productive, again, at the same age, at the same level as Rutschman was at AAA. Adley Rutschman in his season in 2021 at AAA finished with 185 plate appearances that year. So about half of what we saw last year from Ivan Herrera, so he did it in a much bigger sample size. He ended up with an OPS of 895. Ivan Herrera last year was at 951 while down at the AAA level as a catcher. Alex, T-Bone, if I told you right now that Ivan Herrera is going to be for the Cardinals offensively what Adley Rutschman has been so far for the Baltimore Orioles, which is one of the best hitting catchers in Major League Baseball, what does that mean for the Cardinals in the long term?
Jackpot. That's exactly what that means. I mean, you're talking about a legit superstar offensively in your lineup that is a backup catcher right now. That's massive for this Cardinals team. And I think if that's what you have in Ivan Herrera, then congratulations, you're in the lineup every single day for the rest of the season. Now, how do I make this roster work? And I don't know if that means you're looking to trade a Wilson Contreras. I don't know if that means you're finding a different position for Wilson Contreras. They wanted him to be an outfielder last year. Maybe that you get to be one. But that means to me, Ivan Herrera is in your lineup every single day if he is Adley Rutschman, because that type of player you just don't move on from.
See, I think that would have been my answer as well 3 years ago in the National League. Now that you have the DH, I think you can make this work, especially if Wilson Contreras...
I think you have to move on from somebody on your roster, though, because you have a lot of guys that play a lot of positions that you don't have enough to keep them in the lineup.
I don't think this is something that you have to figure out right now. Like, right now, I think that sometimes it's okay to have, like, one guy that's sitting on the bench on a regular basis during the regular season. Where this becomes a little more difficult to manage is once you get to the playoffs if everybody is healthy. But what are the odds that everybody's actually going to be healthy at any one given point in time? We've already seen that this year. But
who's the guy sitting on the bench for you in the regular season? Because it can't be Donovan. Donovan's one of your best on-base guys. You're keeping Nootbaar in.
I think we've seen the way that they operate, though. They always have an off day for somebody, right? It's like Donovan's the guy that starts wherever the off day is on any given day. So if Goldie is off today, Donovan's starting at first base for me. If Nootbaar's getting an off day today, Donovan's starting in left field for me.
Yeah.
And that I just think that that's kind of the way that you go throughout the regular season until somebody gets hurt, and then Donovan just starts regularly there. So for me, I don't view this as something that they need to clean up in any sort of immediate future. Down the road, maybe that's something you have to look at. Or maybe you have to look at, hey, do we consider giving more opportunities to Contreras at first base now? Do we give more opportunities to Contreras in the outfield, whatever it might be? Or do we consider trading one of these two players if it means getting a haul in return for them? But this is a good problem to have. And it's the first time that the Cardinals have had multiple, not just competent catchers, but high-level catchers in more than 20 years. This never happened in my recollection with Yadier Molina. His backups were always just guys that could start 35 games for you and were fine behind the plate. This is a really unique scenario for the St. Louis Cardinals. Kind of reminds me a little bit of what the Braves had last year, but to a better degree. Like, they had Sean Murphy and d'Arnaud, who they trusted both of them. But I think you could potentially even be better than that.
The comp could also be Toronto. You know, Toronto had Alejandro Kirk and who's the one I'm forgetting? Danny Jansen. Those were the two that they had. And at the time, they had Gabriel Moreno as well, and they trade him for an outfielder. But I think this year it becomes I think it is a little bit challenging because it's not just going to be, hey, let's get Goldie an off day. It's going to be, okay, let's get him off his feet and have him as a DH. And then you can't have one of Herrera or Contreras in the lineup because it blocks up the DH spot. Because, like tonight, I expect that you're probably going to see Herrera as the DH. That's my guess. I don't know how they're getting Donovan in the lineup, to be completely honest with you tonight. Honestly, it may be a quote-unquote off day for Jordan Walker, a mental reset day for him, or a mental reset day for Nolan Arenado. So this year, I think it is a little bit more difficult just because there are some pieces in terms of Goldie and Arenado that it's not just going to be a off day because they want to keep their bats in the lineup, so they have to DH, which clogs it up a little bit and will cut down some of the at-bats. Next year, it would become a little bit easier. You know, if Goldie comes off the books, that's one less guy that's going to have to take DH at-bats, so maybe you can run it back then. I think for Herrera, if he ends up becoming Rutschman, I think he has to become the everyday catcher. There is no conversation of, do we make him a DH? No, if he can play good defensively, and I think him and Contreras are probably at best equals right now in terms of their defensive abilities behind the plate, and they trust Herrera to call a game, Herrera becomes the catcher. I know Contreras is under contract. Herrera becomes the catcher, and then you either figure out what you're going to do with Contreras on the team, or you look to try and trade away the contract. And that's the way I think you have to approach it. That's probably that's at least an off-season conversation, if not another season past that. Because if Contreras' defense plays, it's a tradable contract. The issue with Willson Contreras before he signed with the Cardinals, and it's why nobody traded for him at the deadline when he was with the Cubs, was his defense. Everybody said, that's not a catcher that we want on our roster. The Cardinals learned it the hard way last year, where they brought him in and they're like, we can fix him. And then they were like, oh, crap, we need more time to fix him. But if he plays well defensively, Contreras does, it's a tradable contract. And the Cardinals will have a choice to choose from. They can either keep them both. They can either trade Contreras, or, hell, they could trade Herrera and say, hey, let's capitalize on what we have here as a trade asset. They are in a really good spot because it is a very – look across Major League Baseball. There are not a ton of great offensive catchers.
I mean, there are, none. Yeah. There's 3 or 4, and we know their names because of how rare it is.
That's how you get your ace. I know people won't like it, especially if he's Adley Rutschman, but that's how you get your ace with Ivan Herrera. I wouldn't trade Willson Contreras. I would look to trade somebody else off of my team. I think Willson Contreras is a gamer, and this should be no surprise to anybody because I'm the one saying it. But I think Willson Contreras, who has done it at the best level at the World Series, knows how to perform in the big moments. That's a type of bat I don't want to take off my roster. And if Herrera becomes Rutschman, I'm going to find a different position for Willson Contreras, or you're my everyday DH and somebody is just in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, I don't think this is something that they need to do anytime in the immediate future. That's the way that I would personally approach it.
Yeah, this is best case scenario for you this season.
Yeah, for this year, I'm not moving in either of them. I want to see a full season of what this looks like, and then we'll figure it out in the future. And if that means going into the offseason saying to ourselves, okay, now we got to figure this out. Like, Toronto has figured it out. They decided we're just going to keep these two guys in place, and we're going to build around them. We'll see what it looks like down the road. And frankly, they found out that, what they had in, what's his face?
Moreno?
No. Not Jansen, the other one. Kirk. Alejandro Kirk.
1 of 3. We'll get there.
Yeah. He hasn't been the same hitter since 2 years ago that they expected him to be. Maybe that's what happens here with Herrera. Maybe we get to a place where Ivan Herrera was really good in AAA last year, has a great start out to the season, and then he slows down, and in the second half, for whatever reason, overusage, pitchers find something in his scouting report, they decide, hey, this guy is a really nice number 2 catcher. That's very much in play. Let's find that out this year, and let's see what he looks like as he continues to get more opportunities. And if next year they decide, hey, we just want one of these guys, and we'll figure out the number 2 catcher. It'll be Pedro Paez behind him in the future. Cool. But for right now, there's no reason to do any of that.
I agree, don't rush into it this year. But and maybe even go another full season to see what you have. And at that point, I think Contreras would be one more year on his contract, if I'm not mistaken. The reason that I think
he's got 3 years left after this year.
Okay, yeah. So then he'd have 2 years left then. The thing that makes it a little different from where the Blue Jays are, and I think it's why it's a interesting conversation, is because what the Blue Jays have with Jansen and Alejandro Kirk is guys that are in the arbitration process. You know, those guys are cheaper. Those guys are combining to make a little over $8 million this year. What you have in Contreras is a guy that's making, $18 million. And we'll see where they're at in their life cycle. You know, they're going to have money to play with when Goldschmidt comes off of the books, so they can allocate that however they may choose. What I think becomes an interesting conversation is when you've got Herrera, who will be on the cheap and probably ARB1 or right before arbitration, and you've got him playing at a high level, and you've got Contreras, who's also playing at a high level. Can you reallocate his money at some point? That's where I think the conversation will come into play.
You don't need to, though.
Well, we don't, depending on where they are in their life cycle. That's what I'm saying is – there may be something else that pops up, and they say, "Man, we're up at our cap, our individualized cap. How do we free up $18 million to go get? I don't know what they'll need at the time, a left fielder."
Yeah, but they're getting $50 million off the books after this year with Paul Goldschmidt and then 2 of their starting pitchers getting off of the books. The following year, they're going to have another $30 million coming off the books with Miles Mikolas and Steven Matz. The way that they've operated, and honestly, I mean, you look at it with what they have right now in Herrera. Dude, this is like year 1 of him being in the pre-ARB system. He's still got another 3 years before he makes any money at all. And even then, it's going to be like $2 million. So I understand why this becomes a conversation, because we are so desperate for a starting pitcher. Like, that's really what we're talking about here is this the new way for the Cardinals to be able to go out there and acquire their starting pitcher? And maybe it is, but for me, just get the good players and we'll figure this thing out later on. And a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever, maybe this becomes a real conversation. But for right now, I just continue to accumulate good talent. Guys like Thomas Ajayci, guys like players that are down in the minor leagues right now, that's what I'm trying to deal from. The players that are actually showing at the major league level that they can contribute to a winning organization, I don't want to trade those guys for pitchers that, as we're seeing across Major League Baseball right now, will break down at the drop of a dime.
I'd say let's talk at the deadline, though, because at the deadline, if I feel like I'm weak in the pitching position and I've got all of these dudes hitting, I can't be a hypocrite, because we've been saying so long that the Cardinals sit on all of these players when they have something and they don't move on from them. When you get to the deadline, if you need another pitcher, if you've got a ton of dudes hitting, I think you have to at least cough up one of them.
Coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. Get your questions in now, sports or otherwise. We'll get to them coming up at 11:45. But coming up next, we're going to dive into some NFL quick hitters, including a future Hall of Famer that says, hey, might be interested coming back to play some football this year. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deegan. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals begin a series against the Diamondbacks tonight as they are in Arizona. The Cardinals are looking to bounce back after their 2-1 series loss over the Phillies, and tonight first pitch is at 8:40. Over the weekend, the Battlehawks are in San Antonio on Sunday for Week 3 action. That game starts at 3 o'clock, and City SC is playing against Austin FC this weekend at home. Kickoff on Sunday will be at 3:45 at City Park. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
We're back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Let's dive into some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario. We'll get to ask us anything in just about 10 minutes or so. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line if you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise. Alex, I love this. Every single year, the nerdy numbers guys over at ESPN put together their list of the projections for NFL quarterbacks in the upcoming draft. Who is most likely to be a bust? Who is most likely to be an elite-level quarterback in the NFL, and they go through the scenarios on the likelihood for all of the potential scenarios, right? Bust, adequate starter, upper-tier starter, or elite-level starter in the NFL.
Didn't they do this with Stroud last year, and they said he was like an adequate starter or something like that?
Most likely, yes.
I'm the real evaluator for quarterbacks. I know ball.
So this is all by the numbers. Take it or leave it. That's totally fine. Alex, with Caleb Williams, they say there's a 21% chance he is an elite-level starter in the NFL. They also give him about a 1-in-4 shot of any other scenario. 25% chance to be a bust, 25% chance to be an adequate starter, and a 25% chance to be an upper-tier starter. Is that the profile? A 1-in-4 shot. Is that enough for you to take him number 1 overall?
No. I mean, but I think that's the best thing there for you. But, man, 25% chance of me risking it all on this dude to change my franchise. And that might be the best odds that you typically get in this scenario. But, yeah, if I'm Chicago, that's like I moved on from Justin Fields. Now I'm going after this one. And you're telling me a 1-in-4 shot that he's going to be a superstar? It's probably the best I got in front of me.
Let me give you the odds on the other quarterbacks, and maybe this will make it a little easier for you. Jaden Daniels, 14% chance to be elite. Drake May, 9% chance to be an elite-level starter.
If you say McCarthy is above 10%, I will punch you.
Bo Nix, 7% chance. Your guy, Michael Penix Jr., 3% chance to be an elite-level starter. Spencer Rattler, 0% chance.
T-Bone called that a year ago.
J.J. McCarthy,
don't.
10%.
Get the hell out of here.
10%
Bleep
chance
off.
to be an elite-level starter.
No.
In the NFL,
Yeah,
according
okay.
to the numbers. Nerds.
Sure. Talk to me when Penix Jr. is better than McCarthy by week 7.
Except I'm not sure Penix will be starting by week 7.
He will for the Raiders.
I mean, I think if you have a 1-in-4 shot to be a star,
Dude,
I'm absolutely taking that.
I would trade away everything at a 25% chance at an elite level starter.
I would say this. I think it is more of a 50-50 proposition because you said what were the other 2 tiers outside of bust and
adequate starter
and then upper tier.
He won't fall into those tiers. Because when you're the number 1 overall pick, you either are a star or you are a bust. And that is how it goes.
Goff?
What is Baker Mayfield?
I think Goff was viewed as a bust out of L.A. Now, he's had to change his reputation after being traded. He won't be whatever the other 2 were in Chicago. He'll either be dealt or he'll go somewhere else and have success, or he'll have major success.
I would have considered Jared Goff an adequate starter for the Rams. He went to the Super. They
I don't know if I'd call him a bust. A bust is a guy who
I think
backup in the next year.
I think the Rams viewed him as a bust, and that's why they traded him.
I think Sam Bradford was a bust.
Absolutely.
That was a bust. I think the Jared Goff to me would be better than that.
I guess what I'm saying to my point is because he is the number 1 overall pick, there is a higher percentage chance in my mind that he is a bust just because of the status of the pick.
I think J.J. McCarthy's a bust.
I'm talking about just relative to NFL quarterbacks, though. Like, if we just put out all of the quarterbacks, I would say an adequate starter would put you in that, 16 to 20 range. And I think that's probably where I would have Jared Goff. So I think there's a decent, Baker Mayfield, to your point, Alex. I would put
I think he's an upper,
that adequate starter.
Yeah, adequate. I'd even go upper tier for how he plays at times. I would nowhere near put him above. Even Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's not a elite quarterback, but he's not a bust.
I think that's probably fair. I would continue, though, like, the reason why it's so incredibly risky to take these guys in the top 5 or whatever is because Drake May, according to these numbers, has a 50-50 proposition of being a bust. They've got a 50% chance on busting for him, 25% chance to be an adequate starter, 16% chance as an upper tier, and a 9% chance, and that's what you're betting on, for him to be an elite level starter in the NFL. I was a little surprised to see this. They view Drake May as a riskier proposition than Jaden Daniels by the numbers. They have Jaden Daniels as being like a 35% chance of being either an upper tier or elite level starter in the NFL. And they have it as Drake May being a 25% chance as such.
Is it just because May is more of a pocket passer, not as mobile?
Daniels is mobile, and that's what you want right now, it seems.
May is, like, shockingly athletic. So I think that they say in this, there were circumstances at North Carolina that may be responsible for his decline in his final year of the program, such as the departure of his top 2 wide receivers. And there are other quarterbacks with relative lackluster college statistics who have excelled in the pros, such as Josh Allen. May's great arm talent and skill make him a strong candidate to be the next, but college statistics are often correlated with NFL success, so May's projection is lower than it otherwise would be.
But yeah, we're going to say there's a 10% chance that J.J. McCarthy becomes a star. Get the hell out of here. You better go to a team that he can hand the ball off to every single time. Otherwise, we're looking at Zach Wilson 2.0.
Completed the ball 72% of the time, just 4 interceptions, picked up the yards on the ground when necessary.
Yeah, okay.
2-year starter.
See,
Yeah,
I actually think the 10% on McCarthy makes sense because you haven't seen him really fail in the college game. But where I would push back on that 10% as well is I haven't had to see him go win a football game for
That's
Michigan.
my concern.
Cool. Send him to Washington and watch him explode.
But that's the part that, like, it makes Drake May tougher is, like, he reminds me of Justin Herbert. You know, I remember the year prior to Justin Herbert got drafted, it was like, whoa, this guy is going to be awesome. And then you get that year in Oregon where it's off a little bit, but you go, all right, he's still got the arm talent. He's still one of the top quarterbacks in his draft class. And then as we've seen, he's been a really good quarterback at the NFL level when he's healthy and his weapons are healthy. That's who May reminds me of. So I can see how the numbers, based on how they're going to use the analytics, would say, hey, the numbers went down. That means his probability of stars going down, even though that may not be true.
I guess my question would be this. Maybe this is a follow-up on what we're talking about here with some of these players. How good does Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, how good do they need to be in order to warrant a top 5 selection? Did you hear what I just said?
No, I did. I'm trying. No. You did. I'm trying to think because, like, if I say 20, what do you know what the highest percentage would be in terms
I'm not
of
talking
like
about percentage? Like, how good do they need? Like, so if I said J.J. McCarthy, right? He's more athletic than the player that I'm about to mention. But if he became Jared Goff for his next team, is that a guy that you're willing to take in the top 5? Are you comfortable
not in the
with
top
that?
5.
So I would say that's like the 16th to 20th best quarterback. So if he becomes an adequate starter, that is a failure of a top 5 pick. So how high on this list do we need to get to before we're comfortable with it? Do you see what I'm saying here? Because that's where it gets really.
I don't know how to put a ranking on that though, because like it's hard for me to sit there and be like I expect Lamar Jackson-esque stuff if I'm drafting that top 5. But that's kind of where I feel like I need an impact right away. I need you to take my team and make them look like they can be playoff bound soon.
I think,
like if they become Trevor Lawrence.
If they become Trevor Lawrence, I think it's disappointing, but it's one of those where you have to do it. You know, I think the way that the quarterback position is, and it's the most important position across any sport, you have to reach. You know, I've said this before. I think when you're talking about these guys that are kind of like, we think they could become like, you know, J.J. McCarthy, we think he could become a superstar quarterback. We think Drake May could become a superstar quarterback. I think you have to reach on those guys because you get the 5th-year option that's attached to it, and it's the most important position in football. What I don't understand is when teams say, this guy's probably more of a 3rd-round quarterback like Michael Penix, Bo Nix. These guys are more of that 2nd, 3rd-round quarterback. Let's reach on them in the 1st round. That never makes sense to me. That part never makes sense to me because their percentage chance of becoming that stud is very low. These guys that we're talking about, I think you have to take them top 5. Like, if you truly believe that there is a just a 10% chance J.J. McCarthy can become a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, you have to take that guy. Even though the percentage points say, more than likely, he ends up being more of that Jared Goff range.
Yeah, because what is the alternative?
Exactly.
If you don't take him in the top 5, the alternative is I'm getting Sam Darnold on his 4th team in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, like
or J.J. McCarthy. I think he is Sam Darnold.
Okay. I mean, that would be the low end. If he becomes Sam Darnold, then you failed. But the reason why you take J.J. McCarthy is he could be Sam Darnold. He might be Jared Goff. Maybe he becomes like Kirk Cousins. And that's kind of the spectrum that he's somewhere on that line. Maybe he becomes at the NFL level C.J. Stroud. And we're like, whoa, where was this in college?
You bite your damn tongue.
I mean, it's possible. It's possible that we're just underestimating what J.J. McCarthy was because he wasn't asked to do the things that he could be asked to do in the NFL. He was really good when asked to do things at the college level. He just didn't throw it very often, man, because they said, we're going to go run it 55 times and on the last 27 plays against Penn State because we're going to win that way. Why would I throw it when there's like 3 different outcomes that could take place and 2 of them are bad for us? Whereas when I run the ball, every outcome here has been good for us against Penn State. So it's a really difficult proposition when you're in charge of these NFL clubs because if it goes wrong, everybody gets fired. Everybody. The history of this is if you get it wrong at the quarterback position, everybody in the organization is fired within 3 years.
Yep.
Once you make that pick, you're tied to that player. So if it's a 10% chance that you're right, 90% chance that you're wrong, and we're all going to be unemployed in 3 years.
10% chance I'm going to be employed in a year.
Exactly.
Ask Frank
Makes
Reich how it went in Carolina.
Yeah, exactly. With T-Bone and Alex, I'm BK. By the way, Tom Brady said that he was retiring for good from football in February of 2023. In a new appearance on the Deep Cut podcast, he was asked by the host whether or not he wanted to potentially come back later on the season if there's an opportunity. Quote, I'm not opposed to it.
Nice.
Yeah, okay, Tom.
He ain't
Gonna be
coming
a
Basically, a
49er.
team that's ready to win a 49er. A team that's like, hey, we're Super Bowl bound and we lost our quarterback. Can you come play with us? Yeah, sure, I'll take another ring.
I imagine the people at Fox. What?
Yeah, no. Can you do color commentating while you're on the field?
He ain't coming back. He just wants to be in the news. All right, coming up next.
He'll be a Kansas City
He's
Chief.
not Aaron Rodgers, okay?
Oh, dude, did you see?
What is it?
I just saw an article about Aaron Rodgers, but he feared it was career-ending. Oh, my God.
No, look up the other article about what he said about the guy that he was going to run for president with and
Oh, boy.
enjoy it.
Guys
Coming
in-
up next, Ask Us Anything.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions. We may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
Is the Air Comfort Service text line. For Ask Us Anything, can you turn the music down just a little bit for us back in the studio, Jordan? Appreciate you. If you guys have any questions, get those in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line at 314-399-9646. I think you guys heard me this time around. All right. We are broadcasting live today at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. We've got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today. Let's get to some of these questions. Alex, this one comes from the 314. I think you have a strong opinion on it. Did you guys see that Mark Stone is now cleared to practice for non-contact?
What? He's practicing? I could have never seen this coming for the Vegas Golden Knights, who their owner was on the radio station saying how upset and disappointed he was that people thought Vegas was manipulated. Guys, Mark Stone is seriously injured. He even said he potentially couldn't even play in the first round. Oh, what's that? There's 10 days before the playoffs start?
Really remarkable timing.
It's a remarkable. This is Aaron Rodgers-esque recovery to where he could play if the Jets make the playoffs.
I mean, they're very lucky that the doctor was available to see him 10 days before the playoffs.
And I love how Vegas tweets out
it's not contact though.
Yeah, it's not contacted. He's practicing even despite his lacerated spleen. Yeah, okay. We'll see you in game 1 of the first round of the play. I hope Vegas misses so freaking bad because of this.
Wow.
They're not going to.
Yeah, the Blues.
Oh, they will. They will. They're not winning against Minnesota
I hope they win
or
the cup.
Colorado. Oh, God, it pisses me off.
I hope they win the cup. I really do. They're my favorite.
They will because they abuse the system every single freaking time they get the opportunity to.
To be fair, if the Blues were in the same spot the Vegas Golden Knights were, and Army did manipulate the system if someone had a serious injury like that, I would say Army's not doing his job.
Don't let the owner go on the radio and be like, I'm disappointed in people that believe we manipulated. Our player is seriously injured.
I mean, if he had a lacerated spleen, the owner wasn't lying.
Sure. But it's like script. I knew exactly when Mark Stone was going to start skating, and I could tell you exactly when he suits up for the first damn game.
You're just wrong, man. He's going to play game 2.
I'm going to watch Tiger just annihilate somebody in the head with a ball because that makes me happy.
All right, from the 618. Guys, why isn't anybody talking about Steven Stamkos as a potential pickup for the Blues this offseason?
Because you're not getting Steven Stamkos.
Why not?
Because Steven Stamkos is either going to the Tampa Bay Lightning or going to a team of his choosing, which is typically – those situations are typically you go play with your buddies, and I'm here to tell people that one of his best buddies is Nathan McKinnon with the Colorado Avalanche.
Oh, boy.
So you're not getting Steven Stamkos. Mike, I don't think Tampa lets Steven Stamkos walk. This is what Stamkos did the last time around, where he walked all the way up to free agency.
Wasn't that the Toronto rumors? Was that him?
It might have been him. I remember people in St. Louis were like, ooh, Pietrangelo and Stamkos played together when they were 8 years old. He could be a Blue. He walked it up all the way that he could, and then it was, I'm not leaving Tampa Bay. So if he leaves Tampa, I think there's 2 different scenarios. You go to play for Colorado, or you go play for the Vegas Golden Knights.
I don't want him. He's washed up and old. I'm looking at his numbers, 76 games, 77 points, but a minus 21.
Is that true?
Yeah. Why the hell do I want a minus 21?
That's actually shocking.
He has not been good this season.
I mean, he's got 37 goals.
He's old.
39 goals.
Whatever, he's
minus
old.
21 for Tampa? That's shocking.
He's going to be 34. I don't want that guy.
In all seriousness, he really does not fit the Blues timeline. This is not me saying that I wouldn't want Steven Stamkos, of course. That guy's awesome.
I'd take Steven Stamkos 5 years ago.
Kyrie's got a better plus minus.
That's
less points, though. I'll take the points over the plus minus.
He has the worst plus minus by a pretty decent margin on Tampa's roster.
Yeah.
I would be curious to see how much of that is based on the empty net goals that are going in.
Well, and yeah, they've had issues elsewhere too this season. Tampa it really has not been at the forward position.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. Guys, is Kevin Hayes being scratched again a sign that he's not a part of the Blues plan next year? Yes, that would be my read on the situation. That's not reporting, just my read would be, if you ain't playing down the stretch for this team right now, it seems to suggest that you're not somebody that they're planning on being a part of the roster early next year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. It seems like at least Bannister feels like he doesn't give them their best chance to win. It makes sense that he's scratched in this one because typically with coaches, after you win a game, you keep the lineup the same, and they won versus Chicago. If they lose tonight versus Carolina, I fully anticipate Hayes being back in the lineup on Sunday against Seattle. But I mean, for us, it seems as if they're saying, like, yeah, Hayes isn't part of the solution. I don't think you're being able to move Hayes, and they're not going to buy him out. So I think Hayes is on this team next year.
Yeah, I think they may try to move him. I think you're right. I think he's out here in St. Louis. I mean, this is back-to-back years, by the way. He's not played down the stretch. Remember, Philly benched him as well and put him up in the press box. And now originally you may have thought, well, that's just Tortorella being Tortorella. The fact that the Blues are doing it tells me something. And watching him play this year, best case scenario, he's a fourth liner. Best case scenario, you maybe have him back here. He's on the fourth or third line. But I think if you ate some of his salary, you could easily trade him for a late round pick.
Totally agree. All right, last one here. Guys, what do you think are the odds of the Blues being able to sign Chandler Stevenson as a second line center, since Vegas will likely not be able to re-sign him now?
He's an interest, although you never know. You know, put Mark Stone on the LTIR, and he'll come back next season so they can re-sign a couple of guys.
That would be smart.
He's an interesting one. I don't believe Chandler Stevenson is a second-line center, though. I mean, if you look at, like, the last couple of years, he's put up 60-plus points, and he's been really good defensively. But he's also been playing with some elite talent, and I don't know if you're going to have that here in St. Louis. And at 30 years old, would you rather have him or Pavel Buchnevich? Because I think that's the conversation you'll probably have to enter if you're
going to make that kind of money.
I would imagine, especially coming off of this where he's been making $2.9 million, I would imagine you're talking about making at least close to what Buchnevich is making right now. Yeah. So, I mean, are you willing to pay a 30-year-old $4.5 to $5.5 million to be your second-line center? Because this season he's basically putting up Braden Shen numbers. And he's 30 years old and trending in the other direction. So I think I would much rather come back with the same roster next season at my forward spot than go out and throw money at Chandler Stevenson.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN at 15 minutes. Kentucky ended up hiring a coach yesterday, and it is not a name that anybody had brought up previously. What does it say that this was their choice? What does that say about the state of college basketball? We'll get into it in about 15 minutes. But next, what do the Cardinals do in the long run if 2022 ends up being the outlier for Nolan Arenado? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
So what if 2022 was the outlier for Nolan Arenado? Alex, this is something that I do not want to entertain, but I think it's time that we have to.
Sure.
Because when you look at what he did in 2020 and 2021, he was about 10% above league average offensively. You look at what he's done since the start of last year, about 4% above league average offensively. And in 2022, he was 50% above league average offensively, finishes in the top 3 in the National League MVP voting. We all remember that year fondly, and we're like, oh my God, this Nolan Arenado experience is going to be amazing. And it still could be. It's possible that this is just a rough 2-week stretch coming off of a down season for Nolan Arenado. Very possible. But I think it's time that we at least entertain the possibility that, 2022 was the outlier when he had an MVP level performance. And what we have seen basically every other season since the start of the pandemic might be closer to the true form of Nolan Arenado. That doesn't mean he's a bad player, by the way. The Nolan Arenado that we've seen in those other seasons is like Matt Chapman. Good defensive third baseman, a little above league average offensively, but that's more of like a 6 or a 7 hole hitter, and a guy that as he approaches the end of his career is going to be more of a defensive valued player than it is anything that he's going to do for you offensively. That is not the player that you traded for him to be here in St. Louis. If that is the case, Alex, let's entertain that for a second. What does that mean for the Cardinals, both in the short and in the long term?
Short term, it means you're average. I mean, it means you don't have the difference maker that sets you above the rest. Like we talk about the other teams in the National League that are dominant, and you got all these superstars that set them above the rest. You don't have that if you don't have Nolan Arenado performing the way he performed in 2022. And so short term, I think it hurts this team. Long term, I think that means you have to move on from him. And I don't know how you do that because you missed that opportunity. Now, maybe you could still trade him, but I'm not sure the Dodgers want to deal with that, especially if he's underperforming. But if he's not the guy that you thought he was going to be when you brought him here, if he's not a guy who's slugging above 800 or more than 10 points above average with his OPS plus, if you're telling me Nolan Arenado is a 6 or a 7 hole hitter, then you better hope you have multiple guys who are 3 or 4 hitters on your team, because Arenado was supposed to be the permanent piece. You were supposed to write that in pen every single season. Your best player was Nolan Arenado. And now if long-term we're talking, well, who's going to be the best player this year? Who's going to be the best player this year? It hurts your growth in terms of being a World Series contender.
Yeah, short term, it means that this build is fragile. And what I mean by that is the way this team is constructed, I think we all agree they're going to be an offensive identity team, and the pitching is more of we want innings in bunches rather than the 5-inning, 5-and-dive guy that's got swing and miss when we turn it to the bullpen and the bullpen's built well. But this team is built on their offense. This team, if they are going to win 90 games, get to the World Series like BK thinks, it's going to be a great offense that gets them there. The pitching's a little lackluster. You got the number 1, but the offense has to be great. And if Arenado is this guy that we're talking about, and the jury is still out on that, but if he is, I don't know if the offense can reach those limits that we're talking about. I don't know if this can be a great offense that is awesome 1 through 7. You're talking about an offense that all of a sudden has to fill this massive hole of a piece that you thought was a guy that could finish 3rd in the MVP caliber voting when he is right. So I think it is a massive, massive problem for the Cardinals if 2022 is the outlier and the 2 previous years were 2023 and 2021. If those aren't the outliers and that is more of what Arenado is, it is a massive problem for the St. Louis Cardinals.
I'll even take 2021. Like, the batting average wasn't pretty, but you're telling me 34 home runs, 105 RBIs, and you finished the season with an 807 OPS. I'll take that. What I can't have is last year's Nolan Arenado. That is where you are hurt as a team.
That first year, though, that guy is good. He's not great.
Yeah.
He's a really good player that you'd like to have in your lineup. He got on base 31% of the time, man. It wasn't all that dissimilar from what we saw from him last year. It just, he had a little bit more power and played in more games. That was really the difference, is he just had the volume because, man, when you're on a team like the Cardinals and you have all of these players at the top of the order that are going to get on base, Nootbaar, Donovan, Goldie, etc., you're going to have RBI opportunities if you're batting cleanup. So whether it's Nolan Arenado batting there or if it's Wilson Contreras, Ivan Herrera, whoever it ends up being over the long haul, they're going to put up some pretty good RBI numbers. I'm confident in that. You're going to look at the back of the baseball card at the end of the year and you're going to say, okay, got the RBIs. It's about everything else. It's about what can you do to provide damage for my team? And right now, Arenado's doing nothing when it comes to damage at the plate. And so, like, for me, I think it puts so much more pressure, if this is the case, on two players to become stars. You need Jordan Walker to become like borderline superstar level talent as soon as humanly possible if this is the way that it's trending with Nolan Arenado. The other player that it puts pressure on is Gorman, because he better be a huge power source for you from the left side if you're not going to be able to get that in the short or long term out of Nolan Arenado. You can still win this way, but you mentioned the word fragile, T-Bone. That's what it becomes, because your pitching staff is built on the idea that we're going to have an offense that's going to score, and your offense is built around the idea our offense is going to score because we have two MVP-level candidates that are going to be batting somewhere between 2 and 4 for us in the lineup every single day, and Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. If those two players do not become what they were meant to be, the entire foundation of your roster starts to crumble. And so I think this is a bigger problem in the short term than the long term, personally. In the short term, I had a conversation on Twitter with some people last night who were talking about, like, you can't have Victor Scott in the lineup because Goldie and Arenado aren't hitting. And I was like, well, if Goldie and Arenado aren't hitting, then nothing else matters. It's the old quote from the Colts from the book about Peyton Manning, where they said, look over there, that guy, Peyton Manning, we don't have his backup practice because if that guy's not playing for us, we're bleeped, and we don't practice bleeped. If Goldie and Arenado aren't hitting for the Cardinals, they're bleeped. There's just no overcoming that in the short or long term, because that is the entire build. $60 million for this team out of their $180 million payroll, it's going to those two guys. They placed a huge bet on them bouncing back this season, and if it doesn't pay off, then they're not making the playoffs. I don't think there's any way around it.
I look at teams like the Phillies or the Atlanta Braves or the Dodgers. Let's take the Dodgers, for example. If the Dodgers struggle this season, do you think people are going to be complaining because Max Muncy isn't hitting for average, or because what's his face, the outfielder?
Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah, Teoscar Hernandez is hitting below 250. No, it's because if they're struggling, guess what? Mookie Betts wasn't hitting, or Freddie Freeman wasn't hitting, or if the Phillies struggle, guess what? They played without Bryce Harper for 3 months. It's not because of Miguel Rojas or whoever is not hitting well. It's because our best guys were not our best guys. And like BK just said, if I'm spending a third of my salary on two players, you better be two impactful players for 162 games.
So just real quick, T-Bone, it goes back to the Texas Rangers comparison that I've made in recent seasons, where you go back to 2022 and you look at what Marcus Semien and Corey Seager did for the Rangers that year. Both of them were below 775 in terms of their OPS.
Yeah.
Last year, they became like legit MVP candidates, and we saw what the result was. For so many teams, it's simple, but it's true. If your stars don't produce, then you're not going to win at the level that you anticipated going into the season. It's true for the Rangers. It's true for the Astros with what we're seeing from them this year. It's true for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and it goes to the Rangers. You're seeing it on the field with the Cardinals right now. I think there are some teams across baseball, the Dodgers, I think, are an example of this, to where even if their stars don't hit, and look, I'm not telling you it's like still easy to win without them, but you think of the Dodgers rotation, you think of that Rangers team last year, even though Seager and Semien did play like the stars that you're talking about, those rotations were built on, we are going to shut down the opponent. When you think about the Cardinals rotation right now, it's not about let's shut down the opponent's lineup, it's let's keep the game close for our offense to win this one for us. Because, like, we look at the Cardinals right now, and you look at Lance Lynn's outings, you look at Kyle Gibson outside of the Miami Marlins one, Steven Matz, Miles Michaelis. It's all been, okay, they leave the game, it's tight, it's close, you hope the offense breaks through at some point. Maybe they're struggling against a Spencer Turnbull, but when you get to the bullpen, you can find a way to kind of come back in, get a reliever that's on his off night, and the offense pounces. It's not a rotation that is built on, we're going to throw up a bunch of zeros. We're going to throw up a 7-inning, one run allowed, and the offense can score 3 runs and win. The offense has got to score 4 or 5 runs for the St. Louis Cardinals to win, and that's why I mentioned it being fragile. And to your point on puts pressure on Walker, it puts pressure on Nolan Gorman. The reason that it's fragile there as well is, one, Walker's just a kid still learning at the big league level as we're seeing. But two, for Nolan Gorman, Gorman, I don't think, can fill the role of an Arenado, because when you think of Nolan Arenado, you think, and Paul Goldschmidt, you think of, okay, one slow month, maybe 1 month is kind of average, but the rest are just awesome.
It's probably closer. Herrera and Walker might be the 2 guys that actually have to pick up the slack. Maybe I picked the wrong young guy. Maybe it's actually Herrera that's the guy that has to pick up the slack for Nolan Arenado. And that comes with its complications that we talked about earlier with the catcher and DH slots.
And for Gorman, it's just he's not going to consistently put up 6 months of here's what he's going to be at his peak. It is going to be 1 month he could be just truly awful. The next month he may be really great and go right back to being awful. He is a roller coaster player throughout the season. Unlike where I think of Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, what I think of is, you've got the slow start, kind of the roller coaster beginning, and then it just takes off and just kind of goes and stays steady up there.
850 OPS in every month throughout the rest of the season. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes, how does Robert Thomas compare to the best Blues forwards of the 21st century? The Fast Lane had that conversation yesterday. I want to discuss it coming up in 15 minutes, but next, how in the world is this the choice at the University of Kentucky? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. I'm going to say a name. I want to know how many people in our audience are actually familiar with it. Mark Pope. Are you familiar with the name?
No.
That's the next coach at the University of Kentucky. They announced the hire yesterday. Former Kentucky basketball player, was the coach at Utah Valley, did a really good job with them, and then got the job at BYU. And has spent the past 5 seasons at BYU, Alex. Has made the tournament multiple times. Generally speaking, has done a pretty darn good job at BYU. And even in the Big 12 this year, had some success at BYU. That's not an easy jump for a program like BYU, and they made it. And he was successful in doing so. If a program like Auburn, for example, hired Mark Pope, I'd be like, yeah, decent hire. You did a pretty good job. This is a guy that could come in, and you can convince yourself that is a really good hire for a Power 5 level program. When Kentucky, who we said the other day is one of maybe 6 blue blood programs that exist in college basketball, is making this kind of a hire after previously going after Scott Drew and Hurley, Hoiberg, like all of the top names that you could possibly think of in college basketball, after striking out on every one of those options, they decide, who played at Kentucky previously that's coaching across college basketball now that has any kind of success? Call Pope. Oh, okay, that's what we'll do. When that's the hire at Kentucky, dude, it makes me think to myself, all right, what has changed? Is this a sign of the landscape in college basketball today? What did you make of the hire yesterday, Alex?
I was surprised, but I mean, it screamed fallback. It screamed like we have no other options and this is it, so let's just go get the best name possible. I also, and have the contract terms come out yet for him?
5-year deal.
5-year deal, because that's the other part of me. I'm like,
not the money, which suggests that it's not a ton.
Right.
Or should it be?
That was the part that I was like, is this just a hire until somebody better becomes available and then you fire Mark Pope and bring somebody in? But that would be tough to do with the college program, especially when you're trying to build a roster. But, you know, you ask what has changed. I think what has changed is there are guys around college basketball right now that when you get into a comfortable situation, you don't want to leave. Even if it's a better opportunity, a better job, maybe more money, which I can't imagine Kentucky was offering less money than what some of these guys were getting where they were. It comes down to comfort. It comes down to I'm in a position where I'm the biggest guy here. I have plenty of money, but I know that I'm secure in my job, that if a couple of bad seasons happen, we're in a good place. So that's why I think you saw all those big names that we were talking about say, no, we don't want to leave. We don't want to go to Kentucky because we kind of saw what this looked like the last couple of years. But this screamed like we have no other options and we have to get the biggest name available.
Yeah, I think it's one of two things. It's either one, it is just a true fallback, and then at some point in 3 to 5 years, somebody will be willing to leave their situation and take the Kentucky job, and then Kentucky will make it happen. Or I think it's the death of the blue blood programs in college basketball. I still think they're going to be around in college football, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the guys that we heard and we saw the Alabama coach turn down the job. We saw Scott Drew at Baylor turn down the job. Those are not blue blood programs. Those are guys that, to your point, are A, comfortable, but B, they know they can build a sustainable program there with the modern recruiting and the NIL that can play in the college basketball level. And sure, Kentucky will be able to still win. I expect Mark Pope's still going to be able to recruit a pretty good team there to the Kentucky Wildcats. But I don't think it's no longer a, wow, you turned down that job. What are you doing? You have to go take the Kentucky job. This is a blue blood program. No, man, I think everybody's looking at it now going, man, I can build a winning program where I'm at. You know, I'm going to get NIL money from my boosters. We're going to be able to put together a good team. I'm going to get my money. We're going to be able to build a good team, and we're going to be a sustainable program. Baylor's doing that. Houston has done that. You're looking at Alabama now is doing that at this current point in college basketball. Hell, Illinois is doing that under Brad Underwood in the Big Ten. Purdue is doing that. Like, these are not blue blood programs that I just mentioned, any of those. So I think what you're seeing is the blue bloods in college basketball are no more. It is no longer the you have to take that job because this is always going to be a sustainable environment. No, coaches are saying, screw that. I can do it here. I can win at a power conference where I'm at. I don't have to go take another job. You guys figure out your ish. I've got my sustainable program right now, right here.
These are the following programs have made the Final Four over the past 2 seasons. San Diego State, Miami, FAU, Alabama, NC State. That is 5 of the 8 programs to make the Final Four over the past 2 years. You don't have to be at Kentucky anymore to have success, man. If your program is willing to invest in basketball and you are willing to put in the work, you can build that program there. The need to go to a school, I'm not willing to go as far as T-Bone is, where like, I don't know that the blue blood programs are dead. I think it is easier to maintain success at Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, etc., than it is at some of these other places. But the need to go there is not what it once was. If you are somebody like, for example, Scott Drew at a place like Baylor, you have less expectations, you can make similar money, and you can have similar success at Baylor as you would at Kentucky. You also don't have to start over. You don't have to move your family and uproot them to a place that you're not familiar with as much. You don't have to go start with a new roster, start with a new administration. You know what the downside is in your current job. It's completely unknown what the downside is when you take a new opportunity, right? This is the case in our job, where if we decide to go elsewhere, hey, man, there's some stuff that's a downside to our current job situation at where we work, right? At least I know what that is, and I know how to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. If I go to leap to another company and I have to do a radio show there, like there's going to be stuff that goes on behind the scenes that is not forward-facing that I have no idea about that is eventually going to show up. And if I'm a basketball coach, that same stuff exists, man. The administration bickering with the board of curators or the athletic director who's maybe more interested in football than basketball. Like all of this stuff matters. And with the place where we are right now in college basketball, I think coaches are just making it very clear, I don't need to go to these places anymore. I can have success where I'm at. So why am I going to leave?
And I would argue if there is no longer that need, it's no longer a blue blood. That would be my argument. You know, if there is no longer this appeal to leave where I'm at in a good situation to go take on this program. Think college football for a second. Nick Saban retires. Alabama win after the Oregon coach, but it made sense that the Oregon coach said no because that's been a sustainable winner for the last couple of years. He was in a great spot. Washington, though, their head coach took the Bama job. Why? Because he needed to go there to have sustained success. He knew that he probably could not continue to build a sustainable winner at Washington.
Not the same way you can at Alabama.
Exactly, and that's what makes a blue blood program. College basketball, if there's no longer that I need to go to Kentucky to have a sustainable winner, it is no longer, it's either A, it's no longer a blue blood program, or B, we are underselling what is becoming of blue blood programs. Maybe Baylor should be considered a blue blood program moving forward. Maybe Alabama should be considered a blue blood program moving forward. I think it's one of those two. I don't think it is. Kentucky is just downright still a blue blood program.
I think what BK said, too, in a major part of it is, we said this yesterday, I think there are a lot of coaches now that realize the grass isn't always greener. We go take another job elsewhere, and, yeah, sure, you're getting more money, but if that program is in shambles and you go there and you have no real connection to that, they'll get rid of you just as fast as they brought you in with that money. Places don't worry about cutting ties with people because of how much money they paid you. And when you're in a good spot where you feel like, hey, family's happy here, I'm making good money, I know this program is comfortable with me, there's no point in me upping and uprooting my entire life for it.
I think the other thing with this is one of the reasons why this hire was so shocking is because it's rare to see openings at a blue blood program, and it's also rare to see them not filled internally. You think back to North Carolina. When their opening took place, you knew who the incumbent was going to be. It was going to be Hubert Davis because he was already there with Roy Williams. And they basically had told him previously, you're the coach in waiting. Same thing was true at Duke as well, where when Coach K decided to call it quits, he had his next head coach handpicked on his bench. It was John Shire. He was going to take over, and he was going to be the guy moving forward. So a lot of the times that's the way that it goes. Or it's a guy that's had a ton of success at a group of 5 program, such as Mick Cronin when he took over at UCLA. So those are kind of the two ways that this operates. And this was different. A lot of the times when programs, especially athletic directors, go out there and make a hire that is a surprise, it's because they got turned down by their A-list candidates, and then they go in the family. and they say, okay, who was the guy that played here that is having success elsewhere? A lot of athletic directors, that is the default level, right? If things go poorly with Dennis Gates at Mizzou, and it goes in a direction that none of us are hoping or believing that it will, 2 years from now they decide to fire him. If they go down their list of candidates and they've got A, B, C, and D, and they get turned down by all of them, you know who they're going to hire? Kim English. Because he played there, and it's the easy, quote-unquote, hire to make. It may work, but it's also easy. I've seen this before. It happened with Kim Anderson. I'm not telling you that at Kentucky,
that wasn't fun.
This is going to be what happens, but I'm telling you that is the kind of hire that this is. As you look at it, you're like, okay, we got turned down. Who is somebody that we know? We know Mark Pope, and that is now the new Kentucky men's basketball
I'm glad
coach.
they knew him because I had no idea.
We miss you, Coach C.
No, they don't. No, they're happy.
I bet you they kind of do after they saw Mark
Well,
Pope hired.
fair.
Dude, if they could have do-overs,
Fans are like, wait, we loved you, Coach. We loved you.
they would definitely stick with Calipari.
They were like, we're going to get Nate Oates or Scott Drew. Mark Pope, oh, crap. Hey, Coach, will you come back, please? Please?
Yeah,
Baby, come back.
there is no
You
way
can
they're
blame
happy
it
about this.
on me.
Coming up next, the Fast Lane said yesterday that Robert Thomas is at least in a conversation for the best forward in a Blues uniform of the 21st century. Where does he belong on that list as of today? We'll talk about it next. You're on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. On Wednesday, the Blues beat the Blackhawks by a score of 5-2, and tonight they continue to fight for that last playoff spot as they continue their last homestand of the season. Tonight they take on the Carolina Hurricanes at 7 o'clock, and we'll have pregame for you starting at 6 right here on 101 ESPN. Over the weekend, the Battlehawks are in San Antonio on Sunday for Week 3 action. That game starts at 3 o'clock, and City SC is playing against Austin FC this weekend. Kickoff on Sunday will be at 3:45 at City Park. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alex, I got in my car yesterday and I was listening to Fastlane, and they come on the air, and Anthony Stalter asked a question that I was unprepared for. It caught me off guard. He said, is Robert Thomas the best Blues forward of the 21st century? And Jamie said, well, what are we defining as the 21st century? And I said, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be a conversation.
Solid follow-up.
And then from there, Jamie said, no, he's not yet. And it got me to thinking, and I think it's a really interesting proposition of, like, where does Robert Thomas rank right now among the best Blues forwards of the 21st century? Because my firm answer on this is no. He is absolutely not there yet. I do think he's trending in that direction. Like, he's trending in a way, if you're just looking at the points, of going down as one of the 3 or 4 most productive Blues forwards ever, regardless of era, regardless of when you want to go back to. Like, he's got that kind of talent and that kind of production that early in his career that it becomes possible for him. Alex, you've been a Blues fan for your entire life. You've been watching this team since you came out of the womb. Except for the time when your dad got free tickets, he took your sister.
Yeah, she wanted a damn bike, and I was like, what the hell?
Never heard the
I'm shocked you're still a hockey
I never said no to a Blues game from that moment on, though.
And that's why you're there every single night, including tonight.
Look at me go.
You'll hear right here on 101
Still haven't won a
ESPN.
bike yet, though, so maybe I should see if I can get on the ice for that.
Talk to Army about that. I'm sure he'll get on it. Where do you think that Robert Thomas, as of today, if his career ended today, which is not, where would he rank among the best Blues forwards for you of the 21st century?
Wow. Well, what are we defining as the 20?
Since 2000.
I would say he's top 5 right now for me. I think the hard part with Dimitra is it was only 3 years in the 21st century. The first 4 years were the late 90s, and that was where, I mean, he was a dominant, and then he carried it over, and then, of course, they moved on from Dimitra. I would still have Dimitra there. I would still put Tkachuk there. And I think Vladimir Tarasenko absolutely is above Robert Thomas in that sense. And then I guess, it depends on who people want to have arguments with. I mean, you could put a Backus, a Steen.
You said Ryan O'Reilly?
Yeah.
He should be on that list.
Ryan O'Reilly, absolutely. Even a Pierre Turgeon for the short sample size he was there for. But here's the thing. You asked the question, what can Robert Thomas do to get to that point? I think if you have another season that you just put together next year, you've moved up to the top 3, if not top player on that list. Because we're talking about 77 points in 72 games, 65 points in 73 games, and then this year he's a point-per-game player. If you do that again, if you go 80, maybe 90 points next season, I think you surpass all of these guys that we're talking about, the O'Reillys, the Tarasenkos, the Tkachuks, the Dimitras, because you're seeing it at a position that I don't think the Blues have had since Adam Oates, of a center who is playing top minutes against other teams' top players and is picking up a point-per-game season. Like, that is a massive conversation to be in for Robert Thomas. He's not there yet. I would definitely put him in the top 5 because I think we're overlooking what Vladimir Tarasenko did here in St. Louis.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we're even if it was a 3-year sample of Ryan O'Reilly or 4 years, we are underestimating what that man did in St. Louis in the 4 years that he was here. But Robert Thomas is already in that conversation because of the season that he just put together.
I think you're right. To me, he's borderline top 5 right now. I think he solidifies himself into the top 5 with what you said. Another season, maybe another 2 seasons of playing at a star level. You know, the first those 2 years prior to this season, he was really good, but I don't know if he was at that star level yet. And now you see him take that next step, and if he builds off of this season, yeah, I think by the time his time is up with this contract in St. Louis, there's going to be an argument to be had. He could end up being number 1 for the St. Louis Blues. In fact, I'm genuinely shocked that he's 10th in points in this century so far with the St. Louis Blues. That's surprising to me, honestly. But I think right now I would still have like a Tarasenko ahead of him because he was a superstar, and anybody tells you he wasn't wrong. He was a superstar. David Perron belongs on this list for what he did with the St. Louis Blues note, in my opinion.
But not above Thomas.
Yeah, I mean,
to me right now he is. Thomas has done this for 3 years. Perron was here multiple times, and currently Perron third in this century in points with the St. Louis Blues.
But the problem with David Perron was, I mean, for me, it was different eras. Like, the early portion of it, he was the young player. He came back for that 1 year where he was good, but then the expansion draft, like, I really don't think the David Perron that we all remember hit until that last tenure here in St. Louis.
I think some of this also is, what are you judging on? Are you judging on the best seasons, or are you judging on the longevity? And that's really like that's the conversation of Thomas versus Perron. Perron has the longevity. I think Robert Thomas has already reached a peak that Perron never had.
Yeah.
At any point in his career, honestly.
I don't know if Perron was ever star conversation.
He was always just really good.
Thomas's star conversation.
And Thomas has a chance to be a top 5 center in the NHL. That was never on the table while he was here in St. Louis or elsewhere.
I mean, but the reason I'm not, and again, I'm not trying to the reason I kind of hate these conversations is you got to tear somebody down to kind of get somebody up. The reason I don't have him higher on my list, again, I'd probably put him like 6th on my list right now today. The reason I don't have him in the top 5, longevity, and I want to see it again. You know, I think when you talk about these guys, you're talking longevity and consistency. And no offense to Robert Thomas, this is the first season at that 80-plus point mark, you know?
He was 3 away from the 2 years ago, and he was injured that season.
Let's see it over multiple seasons. That's what I would say.
I think we have.
I don't think you're that good. He wasn't the main guy on those teams, though,
that year that they went to the playoffs, he was playing significant minutes as
never the top guy either.
Yeah, it was O'Reilly. The only reason Thomas wasn't the top guy was
Vladdy.
Exactly. The only reason Thomas wasn't the top guy that year was because Ryan O'Reilly was here, so he wasn't getting those matchups. But 2, he was also injured for a chunk of that season, and look at what he did in the playoffs that year. That's the part where I felt like was his breakout season. That year that they beat Minnesota, and then they went 6 games with Colorado. He had 6 points in 12 games. So
yeah, I didn't feel like he played that well in those playoffs.
He didn't play like this right now. He didn't play like a shutdown centerman, but he played. You saw the offensive ability there. And then the next season, he got the defensive responsibilities, which didn't look good. And then this season, he took it to that next level. I think you've seen 2 out of the last 3 years where Robert Thomas has been on that star potential. This was the season that it felt like he punched through that potential and became the star.
For me, the top 5 right now, in no order, is Tkachuk, Dimitra, O'Reilly, Turgeon, and Tarasenko.
Yeah, and real quick, I saw people push back with Turgeon. Look, Turgeon in the 21st century was here 2 seasons, but in those 2 seasons, he had 80 points and 77 points. Like, he was a difference maker, and he's the only other centerman with Ryan O'Reilly and Robert Thomas in that conversation.
Also, Robert Thomas has only had like 3. If we're going to do this, it's Robert Thomas is really he's a 3-year stretch that we're talking about here of what his value has been to the Blues. So, yeah, I think it's fair to have those guys in that conversation. That being said, for what T-Bone said about doing it again, if Thomas is able to follow this up with, let's say, 2 more years of this kind of production at this level,
he's number 1.
It's him and Tarasenko probably.
Yeah, and I would put him above Tarasenko solely because of the position he plays.
And I think that's fair. But it takes 2 more years, I think, for him to get there. I think 1 more year of this level, and it's hard to do this because the Cup has so much value and he won the Conn Smythe. But if he does this for 1 more year, I think he probably passes O'Reilly. In terms of best. Not most accomplished, but best Blues forward of the 21st century.
What if he puts up 100 next year? Does that put him up there? Fast, because to me, that's where I think the next step we're looking at, because by the end of this season, I think we could be talking 85, 87 points, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's more than any Blue, with the exception of Pavel Demitra, has had in the 21st century of a single season. And I remember when I was chatting with Doug Waite, and Waite said, like, he has 35, 75 potential. I don't know if he gets there next season, but, man, if you do 100 points next season, to me, that eclipses everybody else to where it's like, dude, Robert Thomas, that goes from being a star to now you're talking about superstar potential.
That's what I was going to say. If he can get past the 100-point mark, there will be a legitimate conversation to be had, in my opinion, of him being up there with Vladdy. I don't think he surpasses him because I think when you talk, it's almost a different era, even though it was only like 5 years apart. You look at Vladdy's numbers. Vladdy was, in a 4-year stretch, top 5 in goals and top 20 in points across the NHL. That's a superstar. And back then, there was only 5 guys. The year that he scored 40 goals in 15-16, there were 5 guys that were a point-per-game player. Think of that. There are now, I think it's currently 23, and there's going to be more that get there. Like Roman Josi with Predators is at 80 points right now. There are going to be guys that get past that 82-point mark for that point-per-game mark if they play a full 82. It's just a different era. That's why I think for Thomas to surpass Vladdy, it almost has to be, you have to be a superstar and you have to be that over a 3 to 4 year stretch to get to that point.
Vladdy has both of what we're talking about. He has the longevity and he had the peaks.
Yep.
And that peak was over a 3 to 5 year stretch, depending on how you want to define it, because those injuries are kind of in the middle of it, so they make it a little bit more muddy. And he's got the accomplishment. He got the cup as well. So when you put all of that together, it's really hard to be able to unseat that guy. For me, I agree with T-Bone. Like, I would have Vladimir Tarasenko right now as my number 1 forward of the Blues for the 21st century because the longevity and the high-level moments and the cup. When you put all of that together, hard to unseat. Robert Thomas is on pace to do it. I think the fast lane's right, and it speaks to his level of play and what not only he's already done, which, by the way, I looked this up earlier today, 3rd among Blues forwards in team history in points before they turn 25 years old. Only Federico and Gilmore had more than him prior to their age 25 season.
Wow, 2 Hall of Famers.
I mean, we're talking about a guy that is on pace to go down in potentially having his number lifted up to the rafters. Like, it sounds really early because of how young he is, but that's the level of player that we're talking about here. And I think when you put him in comparison to already have him even in the conversation with Tkachuk, Dimitra, Ryan O'Reilly, Turgeon, Tarasenko, that speaks to what we're talking about.
And let's also remember, too, like, I mean, I know Thomas wasn't as impactful of a player as Vladdy was, but he also has a cup. And the part for me that where I really feel like the difference comes in, and this is why I don't know if I need to see it for 2 more years. I think I just need to see 1 more year of it. I mean, this year is very impressive. I think we're understating what Thomas is doing this season. He is a point-per-game player this season, while, as The Athletic pointed out, playing the toughest minutes of anybody in the National Hockey League. Guys, he has had a rotating cast of wingers with him all season. It's been Kyrou, it's been Buch, it's been Saad, it's been Toropchenko, it's been Neighbors, it's been Shen, and he's still put together 25 points, 58 assists on top of not being a power play producer. All of those factors, as much as I agree, Vladdy is number 1 on this list. But, man, if you get 1 more year of this with Robert Thomas, I think he's already etched his name as being one of the most impactful players in the 21st century. 1 more year of this, who's 24, going on 25 years old, I think because the role he plays and where this roster is at right now, you're starting to put yourself above Tarasenko's name.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Would you rather scenario that I'd like to present today for the Junk Drawer, if you guys don't mind, alongside Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK.
Always
so Alex,
take door two.
I'm reading from a story in the Star newspaper. Japan is warning of hungry bears in the spring that may attack people after they come out of hibernation. Apparently, this is something that's been a bit of an issue recently out in Japan. According to a report presented at the meeting, 6 people were killed by bears nationwide in the last fiscal year. The total number of injured victims, though, is approaching 220. From bears.
How many people are just like, you know what, we'll figure it out.
In the country of Japan.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
70% of them were attacked in the Tohoku region out in Japan.
I might have to go there.
Yeah.
My question to you, would you rather have these bears present for the next few months here in the city of St. Louis where, hey, 6 of us might die, there might be victims approaching the 220s over the next calendar year, or deal with the cicadas that are about to
The STD cicadas?
overwhelm us
Yes.
here in St. Louis as we have the Cicada-geddon taking place here in Missouri.
I'll take care of the first one. Give me the bears that might kill me, because guess what? The bears might kill me. The cicadas might give me STDs, and I got to live with it forever.
I don't think they pass those along.
They apparently do.
No, they just have them.
Yeah, until they touch you.
I would much rather deal with the cicadas because you know it's not involved death with those. So.
I can outrun a bear. I can't outrun a cicada.
No, you can't. You get winded going upstairs.
That's
so you're
fine.
not outrunning a bear.
That's fine, but I'll put somebody else in front of me.
Yeah, you're supposed to show dominance, isn't that the?
Well, that's how I show dominance. I'm gonna outrun you.
Granted, I don't know if I've
grizzly bear
ever.
can run 35 to 40 miles per hour.
False. Black bears can do that.
Yeah, you ain't outrunning a bear.
Yeah, I can outrun it.
A black bear can run 30 miles per hour.
See, I can outrun a black bear too. I can't outrun a cicada.
I don't even think you could run 10 miles an hour.
I guarantee I could.
No chance.
Guaranteed.
No.
Zero chance.
Guaranteed. Go find me a speedometer and I'll run past it.
He's gonna do the what's his face?
Michael Scott, The Office.
Scott.
Yeah. I did it. 23 miles an hour. Michael, that's impossible. No. I did it.
Somebody said, why are bears not very deadly? 6 out of 200? That's like a 3% victim rate. I'd take those odds.
Yeah.
Why
you know
would
what you can't get away from? Cicadas. They're everywhere.
There's a 0% chance that death's involved with those things.
No, that's not true. Death of
cicadas?
scared.
Yeah.
Being scared to death is possible.
I mean, if you're scared of cicadas and that's your cause of death, you weren't just going to be here very long. Let's be honest.
From the 314, remember, guys, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the person that's next to you.
And I
when you're running
guarantee,
from the bear.
out of the 3 of us, I'm at least the second fastest.
I was about to say, there's no
I'm at
chance
least the
you're
second
beating me.
fastest. All of the beer and whiskey for T-Bone, that will kick in before
I'm
me.
a pro. I ran a beer mile, okay? So I can handle it.
No, you vomited.
Well, hey, if I'm
While
not
you're
eating-
puking, the bear will eat you.
No, well, if he's eating you, I got time to vomit after.
No,
so.
believe me, you and I got this at least.
No chance.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, now we got to do a 3-person race. BK ultimately
got
wins.
nothing to prove.
So really, it's just me and T-Bone. No, we do, because this segment just happened.
No.
You will get eaten by the bear.
We determined that I'm the athlete of the show and that we don't have
We
to
did
prove it.
He did.
I know. He did a backhanded compliment for
He's
him.
like, oh, I'm the smartest one. Why are we going at each other right now, T-Bone? Let's go after him.
I don't know. Mostly because I still can't believe you'd pick the bear over the
Dude,
cicadas.
you don't understand, man. I don't like cicadas and snakes, man. I don't do
My
them.
wife would do that, too. My wife would absolutely take the bears.
bear? Oh
Dude,
my gosh.
the summer is a nightmare at our house. I have to immediately open and close the door upon entering and closing the house. Like it is a thing. When we're going to the car, she sprints to the car with her little,
her
her
tennis
racket
racket or whatever.
that has electric electric currents running
That's
through
smart,
it.
honestly. That's smart.
It's a thing. I'll have to record that, and we'll put it on social media.
Oh, don't worry. You can record me screaming like a little girl when it happens, because I will be doing it.
Got to get a video of him sprinting to his car after the show, since he's talking a big game.
Nah, dude, I'm in dress pants and shoes. I can barely sit with these pants on.
Fine, man.
Wait till I put my sweats on.
Coming up next, the Cardinals are apparently committed to their roles in the bullpen. How did this happen? Why is it taking place? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
We're back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
There's a story over in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch this morning from Derek Gould and a conversation that he had with Ollie Marmol about the roles that have started to emerge for the Cardinals in the bullpen. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, the Cardinals are hoping to have more of a defined role for their guys in the pen this year than what they had in previous seasons under Oliver Marmol. Now, a lot of this is because they have the players to do it now. They didn't previously, and a lot of them are healthy in a way that they haven't been in previous years. But Ryan Helsley is exclusively going to be used this year in the ninth inning when the Cardinals are up. save situation, Helsley's going into the game. If they're in the 8th inning, that's not his job. Not this year, at least. They have other guys that are going to handle that. Gio, JoJo, what you have with Kittredge and the way that he's been pitching so far. Eventually, you'll be able to have Keenan Middleton in that conversation as well, mixing and matching in those spots. Alex, do you prefer it this way? Do you prefer it in a way where you know I've got defined roles going into any given night on who's going to face what and when they're going to enter the game?
Absolutely. I think that's the recipe for success when you know who's going out where. When guys have defined roles specifically for the bullpen, I think it's easy to prep for games. If I'm Kittredge, I know when I'm going to go out there. If I'm Helsley, I know when I'm going out there, so I can prepare ahead of it and say, like, okay, this is what the expectation is. This is how I go out. I think that's why you're seeing success right now from the bullpen, the exception of Giovanni Gallegos. Like, these guys know what their role is, and they go out there and perform. I think the problem area for teams is when you have to do what the Cardinals did last year, where it was basically every man for himself. Whatever scenario we're in, you've got to go out there. And when we're bad, we just got to find you ways to get innings, because it's hard to prepare for those circumstances. I know Cardinals fans made a big deal out of, oh, they got too many options of guys playing on the field on the offense and the defensive side. I think the problem last year was that bullpen, to where nobody knew what their defined roles were. Now, if you're Helsley, you know, I'm going in if this is a tight game. I know I'm going in if we're up. If you're Kittredge, if you're Gallegos, and then once you get Middleton back from his injury, once you get Riley O'Brien back, that even takes more of a workload off of guys, because now you've got two separate people that can say, hey, you're off tonight. Get ready for the next game.
So I was thinking about this too, T-Bone. I'm curious your thoughts. I do think it says something that Oliver Marmol, who went with a different kind of route early on in his time here in St. Louis, has decided to go this direction, which is the classic traditional use of your bullpen. And as a numbers nerd myself, who liked the way that he utilized Ryan Helsley previously, where it's like, hey, best part of the order's coming up, put your best dude in that spot. I like that usage of your bullpen. It does make me think, and it's making me rethink my philosophy on it of, maybe it's just not the right way to go about it. Maybe guys like coming to the ballpark, and maybe this is a Helsley thing, right? Or it was in Milwaukee, it was a thing with Hader, where they just, certain guys are okay with different things. Sounds like Kittredge is totally cool with, hey, you want to throw me in the 3rd inning? I got it. You want to throw me in the 8th inning? Great. You want me to close? I got you. Maybe it's just the majority of pitchers prefer it this way. And despite the numbers saying you should do it one way, this is one of those situations where you have to say, okay, I understand what the numbers say, but I got to coach players. And the players are telling me this is not the best way to use them. I'm going to listen and change adjust my methods accordingly.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about Oli Marmol to move to this old school mentality, if you will. And he hasn't really gone fully in on old school, by the way, because old school was this guy pitches the 6th, this guy pitches the 7th, this guy pitches the 8th, and then we pray to God we get to the closer in the 9th. And
fingers crossed,
he's
guys.
not doing that. Like, to your point, he is kind of manipulating around of, okay, we can go to Kittredge here, we can go JoJo here, maybe Gio here when they get Middleton back. That 6th through 8th inning is just going to be mixing and matching and who's available. The 9th inning is more of the old school. He is only sticking to the 9th as Ryan Helsley. And I personally like that because I am old school and do believe that the 3 outs in the 9th inning are the hardest to come by. But a lot of credit to Oli Marmol of, if it is a Ryan Helsley thing, and it is, hey, man, I just want to know what I'm going to be doing. I don't want to feel like I have to prepare for 5 outs one day, 3 the next, to 6 outs maybe 2 days from now. I just want the 9th inning. I think the best coaches, the best managers in all of sports, they are the best when they can adjust to what they have. You know, it's not the, well, I believe that the numbers say that my best high leverage arm must pitch in the best spot when the top of the order comes up, maybe in the 8th inning. Hey, man, if Helsley says I don't feel comfortable doing that, the best coach says, all right, we're going to go to you. If we have now, what I would also say is, the reason I say adjusting to what he has, it's clear Oliver Marmol has a bullpen this year.
Yep.
Last year, I don't think it was roles. I think it was a lack of talent that was in the bullpen
I think
last
they were
year.
playing fireman every day. What can we do to put out this fire that's happening over here? What about that fire that's taking place over? Oh no, our house is melting to the ground, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Let it burn, baby.
So, I think there was a lot of that where it was just trying to play catch up at all times. And I do think, to get back to the rotation plans from the offseason, part of that plan is what allows for this, right? And I'm not telling you that I loved their offseason plans. We talked about this with Michael Gersh. I said I'm super curious about it. I don't think it's going to work, but I kind of want to see it. I'm curious about it. It's an experiment that is at least different than what we've seen in recent years, where they've got dudes that, even if they're not going to, I don't think they're going to go as deep into games as what we previously anticipated. I don't think that's necessarily the plan. I think Gersh laid it out pretty well. He said, we need guys that'll take the ball 30 times. That's the goal with Gibson and with Lynn. Like, Lance Lynn's a 5-and-dive pitcher at this point in his career. It's who he is. It's okay. It's what it is. The reason why he eats up innings is because he throws 33 games in any given season. And when you're consistently getting through 5, like every time you go out there, you're giving at least 5. Well, by the end of the year, that has already racked up 165 innings. If you go a little deeper in 1 or 2 of them, boom, we're at 180, cooking with gas here. So when you have that, now I've gotten through 5 with my starter. I can set up my bullpen how I want to after that. When you have guys that you trust, it's about getting through the 6th. So now it gets the 7th, 8th, man, we're mixing and matching, and we're off and running. It's about keeping the game close and then having your bullpen hold it down for you. I do think Ollie, I know everybody hates him. We don't have to have a conversation about it. But whether it was Ollie or if it was Schilt or whoever it was that was in this role that has learned over the past 2 seasons, even if this was Skip Schumacher doing the exact same thing, I don't care what the name of the person is, being in that role and learning on the job and listening to your players, embracing what they have to say, and then applying it to your job the following season, that's coaching. That's what this is all about, man. I also think part of coaching is looking out there last year, seeing we had a disastrous outfield when it came to our defense, and committing to outfield defense from day 1 of the following year. Victor Scott is doing nothing for us offensively. But guess what? He's starting every single day because we don't have another option that can be good defensively in center field. Could Lars Nootbaar play in center right now and make our offense better? Yes. We're not going down that path because we saw where that gets us last year. I think that deserves a lot of appreciation, and honestly, I commend him for it. It might not work. They may still lose 90 games this year, possible. But the way that he's operating right now, I think, are a lot of the signs that you would have if you have a good manager in place.
And to the point on not just the pitching, he's done this with the offense. I mean, you mentioned the defense say, we are going to this in the outfield to be best defensively. We are doing this with our pitching staff. Guys, they announced early in the offseason, we're going to have a starting 9 and we're going to stick with it. It was no longer we're going to go with a platoon, we're going to have this. Maybe they were going to have, like if Carlson started in center field because the plan of Edmund being available didn't happen, maybe they were going to have 1 platoon. Early on, man, it has been clear. Now, there's been some weird off days that they've put in here for the young guys, but for the most part, it's been this is the starting 9. I can tell you who the Cardinals' starting 9 is. Currently, the only one I wouldn't know is like DH currently. And that's a good sign for the Cardinals that they are sticking with their guns and what they planned on doing this offseason.
Somebody on the text line from the 618 said, guys, they only went with Scott because of injuries, not because they wanted to have better defense. I mean, partially true, yes. But also,
I think Ollie wanted Scott all along. The Cardinals went that way.
Their original plan was Tommy Edman. They were going with him in center field because of defense. Look at his numbers, guys. He's not a great offensive player. They went with him in center field because they believe he's a gold glove caliber defender in center field. And then the next man up, everybody in our audience tells me that Dylan Carlson is a plus defender in center. I don't see it. I don't believe it. But that was the next man up. I think Ollie wanted Victor Scott over Dylan Carlson in center field because of everything that we've been talking about defensively. But
hence Jordan Walker and
there
Dylan
are
Carlson.
other considerations in place within an organization, and the organization decided Dylan Carlson was going to be the starter in center field. When that wasn't the case, he's had other alternatives, especially right now with Lars Nootbaar. Noot's not your center fielder. He never got opportunities while he was on his rehab stints to play in center. He was always in left field because that's where he's going to be playing in the big leagues. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll get to a game of One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 different options. We'll tell you which one's got to go here on BK and Ferrario. But next, Alex saw the lineup earlier today and said, this is what I want to see out of my top 4 defensively next year. And there's one player not in the lineup that Alex doesn't expect to see next year. We'll tell you about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, Alex, you saw the lineup earlier today for the St. Louis Blues. Back in action tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. You'll hear pregame coverage with Alex starting at 6 o'clock right here at your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. You saw the top four defensively, and you said to us before the show, that's what I want to see in the top four next year, with one slight tweak to the group. What is that, Alex?
It's the left-handed defenseman, insert name here with Colton Parayko, if you'd like to. I don't know why you wouldn't, but Nicholas Haig's name sounds pretty sexy right there. But Perunovic, Parayko, Letty Kessel. I think if you put a Haig in Perunovic's spot next year, that top four, to me, is a top four that should give people optimism, because you've got a big defensive pair. You've got a shutdown pair with Letty and Kessel that I think would be good together. I think Nick Letty's been really good this year. The problem has just been you're relying on that pair to be more than just a shutdown pair. You need them to be an offensive pair because Falk and Krug haven't been able to accomplish it. They could be somebody you rely on 18 minutes a night. If you get a Haig, you play with Parayko for 20 minutes. And then in the scenario, I like that they're putting Perunovic here because I think they're trying to figure out what Perunovic is. Perunovic as a third-pair defenseman next season, and then in the scenario that I'm painting for you, you're keeping either a Krug or a Falk. In this scenario, I guess it would make more sense to have a Justin Falk there, because if you're keeping Perunovic, Krug wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for this team. But I think a top four of a Haig, Parayko, Letty, Kessel should get people optimistic that at least it's something to build off of. It's younger. You know that Letty and Parayko can eat a lot of minutes for you. Haig has been doing this. You've got two guys that you can look at and you say, damn, imagine what it's going to look like 5 years from now, because Haig is, if I'm not mistaken, is 26 years old and Kessel's 24 years old. That, to me, is a top four that I think would get people excited.
Can I ask a question that's probably stupid, and Jamie's going to come on the fast lane and say, BK's dumb?
As long as the tone is okay.
I don't care what Jamie says. There are no stupid questions, okay?
Why not try this with Perunovic?
That's not a stupid question.
We asked that at the beginning of the season when they were doing it in preseason.
If they are truly going through a retool right now and they're not planning on competing for a cup next year, and I think we can all agree that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Why would I go out and sign some stopgap or trade for a stopgap?
Hey, Haig is not a stopgap.
I think if you trade for Haig, I would be totally fine with him putting in the Letty spot, honestly, and dropping Letty to the third pair. I know people are going to yell about that and say that that's dumb. That's fair. You can if you're up by one goal in the third period, we've seen them do this in the past. You can platoon it where Letty gets those opportunities with Parayko late, where the first two periods you have Perunovic with Parayko. What I'm saying, though, is I'm really curious to see what this looks like against a quality opponent in Carolina.
And that's how I was going to answer your question. You ask why not try it, you'll find out why tonight.
Absolutely. And if it fails, it fails. I would also say I don't want to put too much emphasis on any one game. He's been pretty good up there for 3 games now. That's against bad opponents, San Jose, Anaheim, and Chicago. So I'm not going to place too much emphasis on those for 3 games against poor opponents. I'm also not going to put too much, though, on one game of him doing it against Carolina if it goes poorly. It's entirely possible it goes poorly tonight because it would have gone poorly no matter who was in that spot.
Right.
This is Carolina, man. They're a really good hockey team, and they do it against everybody, where it just feels like they're overwhelming you with rush and rush and rush, and then they've got the forecheck. Like, good luck. But the reason why I'm asking this is because if you are in a retool right now, we've talked to Doug Armstrong in the past where he has said, what does it look like for my ideal pairing partner for Colton Parayko on that top line, top pair defensively? And he's brought up by name and by like the type of player that he's discussing, might look like Scott Perunovic. It might look like a Torrey Krug long term. Well, let's see it. Let's see an extended runway with that. And yeah, have Nicholas Haig waiting in the wings just in case. Have Nick Letty there available just in case. But I am a little disappointed they didn't do it this year, but there were injury, there's stuff going on there as well. Next year, I'd like to see like a 20-game runway where it's just like, hey, Scott, you're going to play 20 minutes a night for the first 20 games of the season. Let's find out what we have once and for all here with Scott Perunovic. And if it fails, it fails. But I want to find out if they've got more than what they see, because we've seen this with other guys that have gone on elsewhere that had the ability to play top pair minutes and we never saw it here.
Yeah. I think the part for Perunovic to solidify that opportunity is, he's good in the offensive zone. And we've talked about how it feels like you just need somebody who could keep offense alive. But in the role that he's going to be playing, you got to be great on both sides of it. And that's why I haven't been as excited about Nick Leddy up there. Is I think Nick Leddy's fine in his own zone, although he does make mistakes at times. I don't think he's good to keep the play alive in the offensive zone. And you're going to have to be good at both. And for Perunovic, you're going to have to kill plays with Parayko. You're going to have to be going up against the best of the best. And tonight, I'm with you. I don't want to put a lot on one game, but watching you play against Carolina, how do you do against teams that go to the front of the net, teams that are relentless when it comes to puck possession in the offensive zone? How do you kill plays? Because those are the teams that the front office is watching and saying, this is why you can't be a top 4 or a top pair defenseman. Or they see it and they say, this is why we see potential here. So it's really interesting of how this goes about, because if Perunovic plays well in this game, and then I would imagine he's going to be there for Sundays against Seattle, against Dallas, even if guys get healthy again, if he goes well down the stretch, now you really are in a position where you look at it and say, okay, well, we got Leddy, we've got Perunovic. I think we're starting to realize that we need some size on our blue line, specifically how this last 20-game stretch has been for the Blues. I think that puts a lot more emphasis on we might have to move on from both Krug and Falk if Perunovic plays this well.
Or just one. Maybe it ends up just being one of those two that you have to move on.
Which Krug would be the one that would probably make the more sense, although I'm not a fan of it because I think Krug brings a lot more passion than Falk does to the game. But or
you just don't make that addition. Maybe they just don't this offseason make the Nicholas Hague addition. Maybe they say our left side is going to be, once again, Perunovic, Krug, and Leddy. And on the right side, that's where we make our switch, where Falk is no longer here, we go get Nikita Zadorov or somebody else that can play on that right side. So it ends up being Parayko, Kessel, and whoever that other addition is from the outside looking at. A Scandella-esque player, even if it's not him, right?
I just, the way if Hague truly is available this offseason, I don't want to pass up an opportunity of somebody that I know can be a top pair defenseman for somebody that I'm still hoping can be a top pair defenseman like Perunovic.
Totally fair and reasonable. I just don't. Maybe this is me as somebody that covers the Cardinals, pushing that towards the Blues. I don't want to see the Blues get Jordan Hicks here, where we see it with Vince Dunn in Seattle. He's become a top pair defenseman for them. Never got that opportunity here. He was never going to, and it probably wouldn't have worked here. But he was capable, clearly. Wallman goes up to Detroit and has this success. It's not quite gone the same way this year as it did last year, but he was capable last year of playing those top pair minutes for Detroit, having some success in doing so. I'd like to find out before he goes and does it elsewhere if Scott Perunovic can do that here. I don't think it's going to work. I'm highly skeptical of it, but I want to have a firm answer. And right now I can't tell you with any sort of definitive nature in my voice, it will not work. And part of what makes me frustrated is I should have been able to do that after this season.
Yeah.
This was the year where
he wasn't injured this year. He was out for a little bit of time. He wasn't injured. You just weren't playing him.
It came down to they wanted to be a competitive team, And
I think that's what's going to happen next year.
And I think that's where it gets to what you're talking about becomes difficult. If you want to be a competitive team, I don't know if you get to experiment. It's the issue the Cardinals have had,
And that's why Detroit got it with Wallman. Detroit wasn't trying to be competitive when they acquired Wallman. They said we suck.
And I'm not saying you have to be as bad as Detroit was. You don't have to. It doesn't have to suddenly become a rebuild.
But it worked for Detroit.
It comes down to what path do you want to go? Do you still want to truly be competitive throughout this retool? Because if you do, there probably is a chance you may miss out on a Perunovic and figuring out what you have. Or are you willing to say, you know what, for 2 years, we hate to say this publicly, we got to get worse before we get better. Yeah. And if that's the case, you get to experiment with a Perunovic, you get to experiment with a Bolduc potentially being on the top line. As much as I think Bolduc probably locked himself in as a top 6 forward from what we've seen, I don't know if that's the case if they want to remain competitive. Who knows what the new coach that they bring in, or if it's Bannister, if they say, hey, my best opportunity right now to still be competitive is Bolduc in the top 6 and Perunovic with Parayko.
The thing with Perunovic, too, is at least internally, a lot believe that this Theo Lindstein is going to be Scott Perunovich, if not better than Scott Perunovich.
But down the road. Again, this gets back to my just like...
But they just signed him to an entry-level contract, and you're not starting him in the NHL next year. But
he's how old? 22?
19.
Yeah, like, come on.
Yeah.
We're like 4 years down the road.
That's fine, but I'm saying, like, I think they look at it as, well, we've got a Perunovich already. So is it worth developing that still, or do we need to find a different type of defenseman for us?
Figure it out first. I'll figure out Lindstein whenever he gets here.
And that's why the Hague thing, I think, is more interesting, because that's a different type of defenseman that you've been trying over these last – and it's not just these past couple of years with Perunovich. You've been trying it since Torrey Krug. You've been trying it since you replaced Petro with Torrey Krug and saying, we want an offensive-minded defenseman, and it's never worked for you.
And I would argue it has worked. I think Torrey Krug's been exactly what you signed him to be. Like, it –
well,
it just gets back to what should you have expected out of a $6.5 million player that is a power play specialist that has some size limitations and is probably at his best a fourth defenseman in your top four.
But I feel like their mindset when they signed Krug, and I don't know this, you'd have to put him on truth serum. I think their mindset was Krug is playing with Parayko. Krug and Parayko are our top pair moving forward, and they realized that Krug wasn't good defensively, and you can't put him out there 20 minutes a night. So now we have to go the different route of finding a Nick Leddy who could play with Parayko.
If that was their thought process, I had crushed him like I did with the Cardinals signing Contreras.
That's why we did crush them.
What were you thinking when you signed him then? Everybody in the NHL knew he was a power play specialist that wasn't good defensively. And the reason his power play production's not there, they broke the power play with him.
Well,
they got
broke
rid of
the power play when you lost Perron.
Yeah, they got rid of the guy that was scoring on the power play. So, yeah, I expected his point production to go down on the power play.
Well, yeah, he was never really a 5-on-5 player. Even when he was with Boston, he was never a 5-on-5 player. He was the play him with Pasternak and watch him score all of the points.
All of this gets back to, for me, I'm really glad that they're finally doing it. It's too late. I think it should have happened earlier. I think Bolduc should have been with a guy that could take advantage of his skill set earlier. I think they were way too late on the Jake Neighbors playing on the top line minutes. Like, all of this stuff. I think they've just been – it's almost like they're serving they are serving two different timelines at once, where they're trying to win but also trying to develop these players. And I get it. Those are both admirable decisions. But it ends up where the Cardinals did last year, where you're trying to develop Jordan Walker in right field as a defensive player while also trying to compete at a major league level right now, trying to develop the pitchers that are in your rotation. And those things, a lot of the times, they just don't mesh. And you got to commit to one or the other. And the Cardinals, they didn't do one or the other until it was way too late. I think this year, the Blues, they eventually just committed to the compete. They committed to, we're going to try to get into the playoffs because we actually have a real opportunity to do so. And I personally, I probably would have leaned in the other direction. I would have leaned more in the let's find out what these young guys are. Let's see what we have with these guys before it becomes too late, and try to get as many answers as possible in a year where we're probably not going to do anything meaningful, even if we do end up making the playoffs.
And real quick, because I've seen a little pushback on the text line of saying this was a Berube thing that he didn't play him in the first 17 games for Scott Perunovich up until Berube was fired. He played 17 games and averaged 14 minutes and 10 seconds. Take out the last 3 because those minutes spike up because of how he's played. But he played since Bannister took over 30 games and averaged 14 minutes and 40 seconds.
Yeah, it was the same way.
So it was the same usage. They both recognize that, like, we can't play him in our top 4. We have Krug, Falk, Leddy, Parayko.
More importantly, don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't want to play him.
Yeah.
We'll find out if you can't. But they didn't want to do so.
I think they told themselves immediately he can't. We don't want to try it.
And I think that was a mistake. Coming up next, one's got to go here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. It's another busy weekend for St. Louis sports. The Cardinals begin a series against the Diamondbacks as they are in Arizona tonight. They're looking to bounce back after a 2-1 series loss over the Phillies. First pitch tonight is at 8:40. On Wednesday, the Blues beat the Blackhawks by a score of 5-2, and they're still fighting for that playoff spot tonight as they continue their last homestand of the season. They take on Carolina Hurricanes tonight at 7 o'clock, and we'll have pregame for you starting at 6 o'clock right here on 101 ESPN. And throughout the rest of the weekend, the Battlehawks are in San Antonio on Sunday for Week 3 action. That game starts at 3 o'clock, and City SC is playing against Austin FC this weekend. Kickoff on Sunday will be at 3:45 at City Park. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
More Blues talk, more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. This is BK and Ferrario. Time now for One's Gotta Go. We offer up the talking points, and you get to pick which one's gotta go on 101 ESPN.
Count that big pen.
All right, let's get into One's Gotta Go. You give us 4 options. We'll tell you which one's gotta go here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, let's start out with this one. One's Gotta Go Blues Players Edition. Kyrou, Hofer, Krug, or Falk?
I'm not getting rid of Kyrou or Hofer. Probably Falk. I think you can go either way. I like the way that Krug plays. I think he plays with a pissed-off attitude that the team needs most of the time.
I think I would go Falk as well. I wouldn't get rid of Kyrou, even though I know he's the hot-button topic in St. Louis. I think you've seen it. The Blues are finding a tough time having it work with Falk on the ice. So I would say that Justin Falk is the one that's got to go in this scenario.
Totally agree. Justin Falk would be mine as well. You said earlier, Alex, that you thought that the Krug signing has been a little bit of a disappointment relative to expectations. I think that Justin Falk trade/signing has been a little bit of a disappointment relative to
I
expectations.
think you could argue both of them.
Fair.
I think both were brought in to be Alex Pietrangelo, and neither were able to live up to that.
Well, nobody was going to. If that was the expectation, then we all failed.
I think we all know that was the expectation.
All right, one's got to go bread edition. Sourdough, potato, wheat, or rye?
What the hell is potato bread? Bread made out of potatoes?
I think it includes potatoes.
Well, that sounds disgusting, so I'm getting rid of that one.
I've never made potato bread, so I'm not super familiar.
I'm not a big wheat bread person either, but I'm not eating potato bread.
You know what? What you just said is a good point. Even though I don't know what potato bread is, I know for a fact wheat bread sucks. So that one's the one that's got to go.
I mean, look, I don't like wheat bread, but I'll eat wheat bread. I won't eat. You could put potato bread in front of me and say, here, I'll have just lunch meat and cheese and not worry about it.
I love a good rye bread with some dip.
I do love rye.
Rye bread is really good, man.
Joey
Underrated.
Vitale's sourdough bread is the best.
Sour bros is sour.
Sour bro bread, am I right? What?
Sourdough is fantastic. My go-to is wheat bread.
Of course it is.
Surprise.
Tell everybody what you ate last night,
rye. So I'll
BK.
go potato bread's got to be the one that's got to go, just because it's one that I almost never have. All right, one's got to go free appetizer edition, chips and salsa, bread and butter. Do you guys say butter and bread or bread and butter?
Bread and butter.
I say butter and bread.
Interesting. I say bread and butter as well, but butter and bread.
I say butter my bread.
Breadsticks or dinner rolls?
Butter and bread have to go. That's disgusting. Why would I get, if you're giving me those options, why would I want butter and bread when I can get the rolls, when I can get the breadsticks?
Yeah,
don't look at me like that. I don't want your white bread with butter. That's disgusting. At least I'm Italian. Give me the Parmesan cheese and the olive oil with the bread.
I wouldn't call it disgusting. Like, I wouldn't have used that strong a word, but I am with you. Like, it's definitely not the best choice on this list, so it's the one that's got to go.
My grandma used to, like, when she would make dinner and I'd hang out there, she would pull out the Wonder Bread and she would pull out the tub butter and say, here you go. What am I supposed to do with this? Are you making a grilled cheese or am I just eating this?
Eat it, baby.
Did you see the face that he gave me when I said that?
Bread and butter is great. Like it's an objectively
Yeah, if I have
fantastic
nothing else
free
to eat.
appetizer.
Here's the other thing.
The thing is, like, bread and butter is the dinner
Well,
rolls.
this is the
That's
other.
hard
Yeah,
part.
but I don't have to work for it. It's already done.
And like, here's the other part. You go to some restaurants and they have like the frozen butter.
Oh, yeah.
So like, you go to like put it on
Rips
your
the bread.
bread and it rips the bread apart.
terrible.
It makes a mess. Awful.
Just put the butter on the bread before you serve it to me.
Amen.
Real simple.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat is youtube.com/101ESPN STL if you guys want to throw them in over there as well. One's got to go video game edition.
Oh, let's go.
Sports games edition. NCAA football, Madden, FIFA, or the show. Can I start?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's very clearly Madden.
What?
Madden has been the same game for 15 years.
Yeah, but
they
it's
put a
still
different
awesome.
cover on it, but it is the exact same game, and I would argue has been getting consistently worse.
FIFA's the same game.
Yeah, but it's great. FIFA's great.
No, FIFA's got to go.
Really?
Yeah. FIFA's got to go.
You are such a soccer hater, dude. You're definitely
What are you
not
talking
watching
about?
any
I
of the
went,
soccer game
I
next week.
went and took my daughter for her first soccer lesson on Saturday, this past Saturday. It was fun. She kicked a goal.
The tough part is like, I'm not sure any of these games have really improved over the last 10 years.
I mean,
so.
NCAA football is definitely going to be different than it was.
That's
Yeah, but we haven't had it for like 7 years.
That's true. I think I would agree. Like, I can think of like one or two changes off the top of my head of like how has FIFA changed, how has baseball changed. I think BK's right. Madden, like I still enjoy playing it. And I'm
gonna
still
say, but it
sucker to
doesn't-
go buy it. But it genuinely has not changed at all.
Fine, but which one are you going to sit down and do an entire season of? FIFA or Madden?
Literally any of the others. Any of
Well,
the
I'm not
others.
asking this. FIFA or Madden? You're not going to stick through playing it for an entire season.
I actually believe FIFA's franchise mode or whatever you want to call it is way better than Madden.
No,
Also-
Madden is like one of the most popular games ever.
Also, FIFA is easily the best to play against somebody in person of these. Like if you got
hard
one
pass
person
on
that's
that
over
one.
at your
I'd say
place.
football.
Hard pass on that one. Madden is
Madden?
so much more fun.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, FIFA's
You don't
easily
have
the
friends
best
to play with.
multiplayer experience of this.
Do you have a gaming system at home?
Yeah, I've got an Xbox, the original. It's great.
Yeah, well, that's why these games suck.
Coming up next, the
Your
Rewind
graphics are
here on 101
awful.
ESPN.
to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Show. Be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
You can always watch us live during the show and after over on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. That is where the graveyard chat takes place throughout the day here on BK and Ferrario. All right, let's recap this thing the way that we typically do by going through some of the biggest topics of the day. Alex, the Cardinals taking on the Diamondbacks this weekend. This is essentially a pure program right now for the St. Louis Cardinals. The Diamondbacks have not been very good so far this year, man. 6-7 on the season. 5 of those 6 wins have taken place against Colorado. Corbin Carroll off to a really slow start this year. Gabe Moreno hasn't quite had the same success that he did, especially in the postseason. The rotation options beyond Kelly and Gallen, not good so far this year for Arizona. And the Cardinals will only see one of Kelly or Gallen. They'll still see Gallen. That's scheduled, I think, in Game 3 of this series. What are you anticipating for the Cards against Arizona?
I'm anticipating a little bit more of a realistic tone of where this Cardinals team is. I think offensively you're going to struggle with the pitching matchups. I'm curious to see how your pitching looks like against this Arizona team, because I don't think it's anything that people are like, oh my God, look at that lethal offense. But I think it's an offense that can cause you problems. I think they pull out 1 of 3 in this series, which I wonder if Cardinals fans come on Monday are disappointed with this team following that result.
I think they win the first 2 in this series. I think you win the first 2 because I don't like their pitching matchups, the Arizona's pitching matchups against your offense. I don't think this is particularly imposing in terms of what they have starting pitching-wise. Now, their bullpen, for the most part, has been pretty good this season. They've had a couple of blow-ups. I would like to see this offense get back on track in the first 2 games of this series. If they don't, I'm going to have some serious questions because we're not going to learn anything about them against Oakland, which is the next series coming up. That team is a disaster. So you got to find out a little bit about the offense this weekend.
It's funny because though I want to see some positive signs out of this offense this weekend, I think the Oakland series is the jumping off point for the offense. I think this is going to be a bit of a struggle. I think they should take 2 of 3. I think the pitching matchups line up better. You mentioned the bullpen's been fine for Arizona. They've blown some games against some quality teams. They should have swept Atlanta, and they lost 2 of 3 to them because their bullpen blew a couple of games. So I think your pitching, if it keeps it close, the offense is probably going to have its moments. It's probably going to have some struggles. I think you should be able to take away 2 or 3 because I think you're playing better fundamental baseball than what Arizona is right now.
Blues trying to stay alive tonight against Carolina. They also have one more home game on Sunday against Seattle. Let's start with this one for tonight against Carolina. Alex, do you give them any chance in this one? It's a tough one, man. That's a really good team.
It's a very tough one. I think that this one could be at minimum a point. I don't think this is a blowout because I think the Blues are able to keep it close with Carolina and with Binnington and net, but I don't think they win this one, which if they lose in overtime or a shootout, their hopes are still alive. But if Vegas wins against Minnesota later on tonight, they're only 1 point away from eliminating you. But I think they lose. I think they keep this one close, though. I think this is an overtime or a shootout loss.
Carolina has at least a point in 12 of their last 14 games. They're a juggernaut right now. And good luck scoring against them. Here's what they've given up in terms of the goals allowed recently. 0-0, 2-0, 1-4, and that came against Boston, a team that is pretty damn good in their own
I don't know who's starting, if it's Anderson or their backup, which I totally can't pronounce his name. But if Frederick Anderson is starting, your night is going to be tougher because it's like Coach Tioff or something like that. Anderson is like Vezina level. The problem is he's been out all season, but the dude is rested. So if it's Anderson, you're going to be in for a tough night offensively.
I think they end up losing this one in regulation, and we get to see all of the kids over the next couple of games.
I think they get eliminated.
Do you think Vegas wins tonight, too?
Yeah.
And it's flurry for Minnesota, and I don't know what Vegas has going out there.
Vegas definitely wins then.
Yeah.
That flower is dead.
And that is the scenario, by the way, to where if the Blues do not pick up a point and Vegas picks up 2 in any fashion, then you are officially eliminated tonight.
Hopefully, they are able to pick up a couple of wins, and on Monday, we're talking about them still being in contention for a spot in the postseason. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Huge thanks to Jordan Deacon for doing great work back in the studio for us today. We've been broadcasting live from the EMB Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. We'll talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. Have a great weekend. Fastlane coming up next.